Chapter 1059. The people from the big clans all looked sullen. If this is called taking advantage, then everyone should take advantage of me. This is simply asking for trouble. Zixieqing didn't stand on ceremony at all. She instructed Chu Yang to keep all the purple crystals that were given to her. Dong Wushang, Wan Renjie and the rest were all dumbfounded. I'm going to faint. This big sister Z is actually such a bold and powerful person. She alone, with just one sentence, could suppress the heavens. The auction that followed became lively. If the big clans wanted to get a stock of medicine, they had to bid. And the bidding was very crazy. There was absolutely no way that it would go unsold. If it went unsold, this powerful person would say, "Why did your clan let this thing go unsold? I think it's very valuable. Do you think it's not?" And then each clan would have to pay double the price. That would be going for wool and coming home shorn. Under such circumstances, everyone from the big clans complained incessantly. How many purple crystals could they afford to spend like this? They couldn't help but look at the 4 private rooms that they couldn't afford to offend. They prayed in their hearts, "Hurry up and bid. We can't hold on much longer." Finally, when it was time for the black-blooded red fruit, Buluqing bid 100,000 purple crystals. This price was indeed not high. The starting price for the black-blooded red fruit was already 100,000. This guy didn't even add a single word. The big clans heaved a sigh of relief. My goodness, in this short period of time, each clan had bid for more than 30 stalks of medicine. The purple crystals that they had brought with them were almost used up. Buluqing bid, "Just nice, let this guy hold on for a while. Yes, it's not that we don't want to support him, but we can't afford to offend this guy." Buluqing opened his mouth. There was complete silence. Everyone was gloating. If Buluqing and this powerful person got into a conflict, it would definitely be a good show. But the strange thing was that the powerful woman didn't make a sound. So, Buluqing bid for a black-blooded red fruit, with a starting price of 100,000 purple crystals. Next, a dazzling sound vine. Buluqing bid again, 100,000 purple crystals. Still no one competed. The zombie-faced auctioneer was very eloquent. The hammer fell with a thud. It went to Buluqing again. Again the starting price. Everyone was puzzled by these words. What's wrong? Could it be that the woman was also wary of Buluqing? Chu Yang was grinning from ear to ear in the private room. He still had some of these items in stock. Even if Buluqing didn't buy them, he would still find a way to send them to Qing Wu. Now that Buluqing was willing to spend money, it couldn't be better. Who knew how many good things this old man had plundered all these years? It was only right that he spit out a little. Seeing the purple crystals flowing into his pocket like a river, Chu Yang heaved a huge sigh of relief. After this auction, even if Calamity's sword had to devour a portion of the purple crystals, the brothers would need to cultivate for at least 20 years. There was no need to worry at all. Everything was settled in one go. The purple crystal was the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Buluqing bid for 3 items in a row. It seemed like he had run out of money, so he didn't make another bid. Immediately after, the Feng and Yu couple won 10 spirit herbs in one go. However, compared to Buluqing, the Moon Breeze couple's offer was much more reasonable. Basically, he bought it at market price. Compared to someone as shameless as Buluqing, he seemed to have more class. Moreover, Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro were very excited. This mysterious senior had actually appeared here. Moreover, there were so many medicines. They were all hers. After the auction ended, he must pay her a visit. Then, the Dharma Supreme also bid for 20. The Dharma Supreme's price was more average. He didn't offend Zixieqing and didn't spend too much money. He had a good grasp of the situation. In the following auction of the Black Blood Divine Medicine, the various clans no longer used purple crystals. Instead, they used precious herbs, resources, and minerals to exchange for them. Batch after batch was exchanged. Chu Yang felt an itch in his heart. He couldn't wait to dig out another 700 to 800 herbs from his calamity space to auction. It felt so good to make a fortune like this. It was equivalent to starting from a nameless beggar. Suddenly, he became the richest man in the world. That kind of feeling. Purple crystals. Come hi. Precious minerals, come hi. Rare medicines, come on. Even the sword spirit didn't go into seclusion. He looked greedily at the precious materials that were being auctioned, exchanged and discounted before entering the back hall. That look in his eyes was as if he couldn't wait to swallow those things up. Great nourishment. The elders and supreme martial artists of the various clans were all pale with fright. Although the spirit herbs were very valuable and had great effects. But they weren't that valuable. The various elders could clearly feel that this wasn't an auction, but a slaughterhouse. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. In front of them, a big shiny knife was being sharpened and ready to slaughter them at will. Wherever they saw fat, the knife would cut them. Moreover, this kind of slaughter was done by them voluntarily, allowing others to pick and choose. They were being slaughtered and still afraid that others would be unhappy. It went without saying how aggrieved this feeling was. In all these herbs, other than the ones left by the Medicine Valley, those that the 4 big clans couldn't afford to offend, and those low-grade goods that some small clans bought at the beginning, the rest were all divided up by the 8 big clans. And basically the price was double. Towards the end, when it came to the precious minerals and all kinds of rare spiritual materials, there were even less of them. It was as if the woman in the 3rd room was sick. Whenever she encountered a price that she didn't like or wasn't satisfied with, she would cough. It was as if she had tuberculosis. But once she coughed, the price that was about to be finalized would be doubled again. This kind of wealth was simply too awesome. Finally, the zombie-faced man held out a purple crystal box and said, "Next, the auction items are the herbs specially selected by the Medicine Valley for this medicine banquet. Everyone please pay attention. The first item is a poisonous herb called blood orchid." As he spoke, he recited the characteristics of the blood orchid and finally announced the starting price. 30,000 purple crystals. Before he finished, Chu Yang, who was originally sitting in the room with his legs crossed, suddenly coughed pretentiously and said lightly, "I offer 30,000 and 1 purple crystal." Once this sentence came out, everyone was instantly speechless. Then a stifling feeling rose up. Either you don't add, or you add a little more. The starting price was 30,000, and you only added 1 purple crystal. What was this called? Immediately, someone wanted to make a ruckus. But after waiting for a while, the people below were surprised to find that after this guy made the bid, the private rooms of the big clans were silent. There was no fighting, no snatching, no scolding, and no reprimanding. It was as if this matter was extremely normal. It was too strange. What was going on? Could it be that this young man was more powerful than the big clans? They had never heard of such an awesome person in the upper 3 heavens. Although they couldn't figure it out, if the big clans didn't dare to say anything, the others naturally didn't dare to object. In the second room, Mo Qinggu suddenly stood up. "This is Brother Chu Yang's voice." She was about to rush out. But Lu Qing secretly complained in his heart. This little girl was really everywhere. How did she manage to get here? He grabbed Mo Qinggu and said, "Not necessarily. There are too many people with similar voices in the world. Little Wu, confirm it first. There are so many people here. Don't make a fool of yourself." Mo Qinggu said firmly, "I won't hear wrongly. Brother Chu Yang's voice. I will never hear wrongly." But Lu Qing felt powerless. Mo Qinggu rushed out of the private room and stood outside, patrolling around. Her gaze was anxious. Her expression was urgent. A red shadow was pacing back and forth on the railing, watching anxiously, waiting for Chu Yang to speak again. Unknowingly, tears had already filled her eyes. She only felt that her heart was beating extremely violently, as if it could jump out of her throat at any time. A wave of sad longing, accumulating in her heart, surging, tumbling, waiting to pour out. Many people below were watching. They didn't know what this little girl in red, who looked like a human, was looking for and thinking about. The auctioneer said loudly, 30,000 for another piece of purple crystal. Is there a higher bid? Is there a higher bid? Is there a higher bid? 1, 2, 3 sold. Bang! The gavel fell. The people from the big clans all felt a little uncomfortable. In their eyes, Chu Yang did this. It was definitely that powerful being who deliberately ordered him to do this to disgust them. But they didn't dare to make a sound. Chu Yang got the blood orchid at the base price. But his heart suddenly became a little agitated and restless. For a moment he was actually a little anxious, as if someone was calling out to him. Chu Yang frowned, and suddenly became upset. He couldn't control the kind of emotions that wanted to vent. He murmured, "What's going on? Why is my heart so messed up? Is little Wu here? Could it be little Wu here?" The next item to be auctioned is the most poisonous in the world, the blood lotus. The base price is 35,000 purple crystals. As soon as the auctioneer said this, Chu Yang stood up. He looked very agitated. Zi Xiecheng also looked very excited. Chu Luer's eyes lit up and her little face turned red. The last elixir that Chu Luer needed for her illness actually appeared at this auction, without any warning. Chu Yang never expected this. He bid for this blood orchid just in case. If he couldn't get the blood lotus, he would replace it with the blood orchid. Although it was a little lacking, it could still be used. It was just that it couldn't achieve the best results. It had been almost a year since he brought Chu Luer out. Chu Luer's illness didn't have much time left. So Chu Yang had to prepare a spare tire in advance. At this moment, when the blood lotus appeared, Chu Yang, who was already a little upset, couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up and strode out, saying loudly, "I bid 40,000 purple crystals for the blood lotus." Mo Qinggu, who was searching hard, let out a moan. She looked at the tall and straight figure that appeared in the distance in disbelief. Her heart instantly felt sour and sweet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She desperately wiped the tears that were gushing out of her eyes and murmured, "Brother Chu Yang." Her voice was so soft and muffled that even she herself couldn't hear it clearly. But this voice made the little girl feel that she wasn't dreaming. Mo Qinggu stood up abruptly and used all her strength to shout loudly, "Brother Chu Yang." Tears flowed freely from her eyes and face, but this shout was filled with joy. It was filled with the surprise of a reunion after a long separation, and a deep longing. Fourth update. 5,300 more. Rest for a while. Eat then continue writing. I wrote 4 updates in one night. Chapter 1060. Chu Yang frowned, thinking about the vexation and longing in his heart. Suddenly, Mo Qingwu's figure surged into his mind. After calling out 40,000 purple crystals, he actually became a little dazed. It was as if a red figure was singing and dancing in front of him, floating up and down for a moment. A strong sense of bitterness and longing welled up in his heart. In a daze, he suddenly heard someone call out, "Brother Chu Yang." Chu Yang raised his head abruptly and saw a petite figure in red drawing a beautiful neon light in the air, flying towards him. Behind her, there were red afterimages that seemed to be dancing in the air. Chu Yang was stunned. In that instant, he actually couldn't tell if this was reality or a dream. He couldn't help but murmur, "Xiaowu? Qinggu?" The next moment, a petite figure suddenly crashed into his arms. Chu Yang felt softness in his arms and smelled a fragrance. Finally, he hugged her and said in surprise, "Xiaowu? It's really you?" Mo Qingwu's face was already covered in tears. Choking with sobs, she buried her head in his arms and nodded vigorously, knocking into Chu Yang's chest. The longing and suppression that had been suppressed for a long time was completely released at this moment when she saw Chu Yang. Her hands wrapped tightly around Chu Yang's body. Mo Qingwu felt that she was so happy at this moment. She greedily breathed in Chu Yang's scent, crying and laughing. At this moment, she didn't care about other people's gazes at all. After a long time, when this emotion was released, the little girl slid down from Chu Yang's arms. She pouted a little embarrassedly and rubbed her eyes. Then her face turned red. She twisted her waist shyly and laughed, stomping her feet. She wanted to say something, but at the moment when the words were about to leave her mouth, she actually forgot them. So she stomped her feet in annoyance, bit her lips and blinked her eyes. Suddenly, she came to her senses and turned around, covering her face with her hands. Chu Yang's heart finally fell to the ground. He chuckled and held the little girl's shoulders. He said, "So it's really Xiaowu, ha ha ha. Come, let brother Chu Yang see. Have you grown up now?" Mo Qinggu turned her body around, but still covered her face, not letting him see. He wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. She also felt a little embarrassed, as well as the hazy emotions of a young girl. At this moment, after the initial excitement, Mo Qingwu found that she had become even more nervous. His heart was beating even faster. Chu Yang laughed heartily. He felt extremely comfortable, joyful, and happy. It had only been a year since they last met. But the little lass had really changed a lot. She had grown taller. Moreover, the figure of a young girl was also beginning to be revealed. Originally, when Mo Qingwu pounced on him like this on the third day, Chu Yang felt a little uncomfortable. But now, he only felt a kind of soft happiness. The little girl was still a little skinny, but her shoulders were thin, her waist was slender, and her buttocks were full. Her figure was already beginning to show. Her chest was like a small lotus flower, and it was bulging shyly like a flower bud. Her hair was like clouds, and she was tall and slender. Chu Yang grinned and chuckled. He gently removed Mo Qingwu's hand from her face and said, "Let me see, let me see." Mo Qingwu stubbornly refused to let go and said, "I'll let you see if you're not allowed to laugh." Chu Yang solemnly promised, "I won't laugh." Mo Qingwu quietly moved away a little, and met Chu Yang, who was already beaming with joy. She couldn't help but be annoyed. She pouted and said, "Still say you're not laughing." She actually covered her face again. Chu Yang laughed heartily. Then, he pulled Mo Qingwu's hand and led her into his room. After Chu Yang called out the price, the whole place was silent. Naturally, the lotus fell into Chu Yang's hands. Now the medicine for his sister Chu's treatment was all ready. Mo Qingwu just happened to be back today, and Chu Yang temporarily didn't have any suspicions about the tribulation sword master. Bu Luqing had already rushed over anxiously. Hey, young Chu, don't kidnap my disciple." Chu Yang turned back and beamed. "Senior Bu, you're here too. Haha, please come in and have a seat." Bu Luqing couldn't wait to guard against him. Why would he come in and have a seat? He went to pull Mo Qingwu and said, "It's too dangerous to be with you. My disciple still has to cultivate. She's in the golden stage of cultivation. How can we waste time?" Mo Qingwu finally saw Chu Yang. Her heart still hadn't recovered from the bottleneck. She only felt that her mind was still in a trance. It felt like a dream. She was extremely excited and happy. How could she be willing to go back with Bu Luqing at such a time? She shrank back and pouted unhappily. "Master, I've already seen Brother Chu Yang. How can I still cultivate? I'll accompany Brother Chu Yang and have a chat." Bu Luqing glared at her and said, "How can a chat take so long? Little Wu, you don't understand. You're a girl. You have to be careful. There are many people in this world who have the heart of a beast. You can't tell from the surface." Mo Qingwu pouted and said, "My brother Chu Yang isn't such a person. Master, you've been doing everything possible to stop me from finding Brother Chu Yang. Is it because you're afraid that he has the heart of a beast? Master, you're so narrow-minded." Bu Luqing sighed and looked at Chu Yang with murderous eyes. Chu Yang was a little confused. The last time he saw Bu Luqing in the three heavens, he didn't seem to be so rude. Why does it seem like he's full of wariness towards me this time? He's like an old hen trying to stop her chicks from getting close to a fox. Shermu suddenly understood why Bu Luqing would think this way. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that the Dharma Supreme's words that night had a huge impact on Bu Luqing. This guy believed that all tribulation sword masters were heartless people, and was afraid that his disciple would be taken advantage of. Chu Yang smiled and said, "Elder Bu, what are you talking about? We've met again after such a long time. Shouldn't we have a good gathering? Besides, there are many acquaintances inside." What he meant was, "I'm not alone with your disciple. We're always right under your nose. What are you afraid of?" Bu Luqing frowned and said, "Even if there are many acquaintances." At this moment, a terrifying aura was suddenly emitted from the private room. A faint voice said, "You're the #1 expert of the heavens, supreme martial artist Bu, right?" Bu Luqing's expression turned serious and he said, "I don't deserve to be the #1 expert of the heavens. May I know who you are?" Zi Xieching said indifferently, "Indeed, I don't deserve to be the #1 expert. However, I can still come in for a chat." Bu Luqing's anger rose and he said indifferently, "If that's the case, I'd like to learn from you." As he said, he strode in. Chu Yang smiled. Zi Xieching was indeed the best at dealing with people like Bu Luqing, #1 expert of the heavens. This caused his temper to flare up. However, Chu Yang also knew The same method also depended on who was using it. If he said it himself, Buluqing would probably not even bother with him, and would just laugh it off. However, Zixieqing was qualified to comment on this number one expert of the heavens. Therefore, the words that came out of her mouth carried a lot of weight. Mo Qinggu didn't even consider this point. She also didn't consider that her teacher was already secretly competing with Zixieqing inside. Her mind was filled with Chuyang now. She leaned on Chuyang and held his arm in her arms. The little girl felt extremely happy. It was as if she had someone to rely on for her entire life. The two of them spoke softly. Mo Qinggu raised her head from time to time to look at Chuyang. There were still traces of tears at the corner of her eyes. However, the corners of her mouth were already blooming with a happy and gentle smile. She walked slowly into the private room. This situation made Chu Yang's heart suddenly ache, especially the gentleness at the corner of Mo Qinggu's mouth. It made him combine the Mo Qinggu in front of him with the Mo Qinggu in his previous life. This was a gentleness that almost made him lose himself. The Qinggu in his previous life was just so gentle. She was so docile and obedient. No matter what, she would always put him first, including her own life. She had no regrets. As long as she could be with him, no matter how short the time was, she would wholeheartedly enjoy it. The time they spent together, even if it was just a blink of an eye. Cherish. The husband is the rock, the concubine is the vine. Everything is in the husband's body. Qingwu. Chuyang moaned softly in pain. Unknowingly, he held Mo Qinggu's little hand tightly, as if he was afraid that she would turn into a puff of smoke and disappear like in his previous life. Brother Chuyang? Mo Qinggu raised her head and looked at Chuyang with her bright eyes. There was gentleness, trust, worry, and a kind of doting in her gaze. I won't let you cry again. Chuyang forced a smile and squeezed her little hand. He said as if he was making an oath. Qinggu, you must be happy. I will let you be so happy for all your lives. Mo Qinggu looked at him in a daze. Suddenly, her eyes turned red and she sobbed. But Brother Chuyang, when you say this, I feel so happy that I want to cry. The two had already walked to the door. It was just a few steps, but the two actually walked for half a cup of tea's time before they reached the door. Chuyang was about to lift the curtain when Mo Qinggu pressed his hand down. Looking into Chuyang's eyes, Mo Qinggu said softly, Brother Chuyang, you used to call me Little Wu, but today when you call my name, you call me Qinggu. Chuyang was startled. He said, What's the difference? Little Wu has grown up. Of course I should call you Qinggu. If you keep calling me Little Wu, it feels like Little Wu hasn't grown up yet. Mo Qinggu tilted her head and thought for a while. She nodded in agreement and said, That's true. Chuyang couldn't help but smile when he saw how childish she was, and how she still pretended to be mature. Mo Qinggu tilted her head and murmured, My name is Mo Qinggu, but since I was young, very few people called me Qinggu. They all called me Little Wu. But today, Brother Chuyang, you called me Qinggu. Why do I feel that it's so familiar? This feeling is very strange. Chuyang's heart shook. Familiar? Strange. I started writing this chapter at 4 this afternoon. Halfway through, I unintentionally clicked on a song called Love You Now and Forever. When I heard the line, not being by your side for so many years, it's been hard on you, my sweetheart. I suddenly fell into a daze and listened to it over and over again for dozens of times. There will be more updates tonight. This is 5,500 Canadian dollars. At present I still owe 3 chapters. Begging for monthly votes. To be continued. Chapter 1061. Mo Qinggu tilted her head and said mischievously, It's very familiar, as if you've been calling me that for many years. Haha. Mo Qinggu was smiling, but Chuyang's heart became heavy. He wondered if he was being too sensitive, thinking too much. A soft sound came from the private room. Chuyang and Mo Qinggu walked in, and saw Dong Wuxiang, and the rest standing at one side. Zixieqing was sitting in the middle, and Buluqing was standing like a sword opposite her. The two of them seemed to have exchanged blows secretly. Zixieqing was calm and collected, while Buluqing revealed some sword intent. You're indeed an expert. Buluqing sighed. Zixieqing smiled lightly and said, Number one in the heavens. You're indeed worthy of your reputation. Brother Bu may not be the true number one, but he can definitely be ranked in the top 3. It's not an exaggeration. Buluqing smiled coldly and said, Top 3? Top 3? So you mean you're number 1? Xiexing shook her head lightly and said, Brother Bu, you shouldn't compare yourself with me. Because she used her telepathy and sent a sentence over. Because I'm not from this world. Buluqing was shocked, and then a gentle smile appeared on his face. He said, I see. After Buluqing came in and fought with Xiexing secretly, he was at a disadvantage. He couldn't help but feel a huge blow to his heart. He had always boasted that he was at the peak of the heavens, especially when the Dharma Supreme, who was recognized as number 1 in the world, was at a disadvantage in his hands. Buluqing was full of confidence. Who would have thought that once he came in, he was at a complete disadvantage and almost had no power to fight back? The disappointment in his heart at this moment was really indescribable. But now that he heard Xiexing say that he wasn't from this world, his mentality was immediately adjusted. He was someone who had surpassed this world. How could he be a match for him? Brother Bu, are you worried about the Tribulation Sword Master? Xiexing continued to transmit her telepathy. Buluqing was shocked. Chu Yang is definitely not that kind of person. Xiexing transmitted her telepathy and said, I think you should believe my words. Buluqing's expression changed. He forced a smile and said, I felt that your excellency was by his side helping him. So, I was certain that he wasn't a bad person. According to what I know with your cultivation level, you can already pry into the heart, right? Xiexing nodded slowly. Therefore, from the moment I came to this room, I've already set my heart at ease. Buluqing smiled and said, Therefore, I've already set my heart at ease. It's just a simple battle, nothing else. Buluqing nodded. Senior, please enlighten me. This heavens beyond. Buluqing continued to ask. This. I will talk to you when you come to pick up your disciple. Xiexing's eyes flashed. He sized him up and said, Actually, you're only half a step away from becoming a grandmaster. But, you'll have to deal with your worries first. Otherwise, after entering the sky beyond heaven, over the years, it became an inner demon. The heart devil of outer heaven cannot be resisted. Buluqing's heart shook as he replied, Yes. He thought to himself, So she actually knew my wish. Without saying anything else, he nodded his head in acknowledgement. He took 2 steps back. In the room, he could faintly feel the terrifying aura of 10,000 swords. Just like that, it suddenly disappeared. Buluqing turned his head and said, Xiaowu, stay here for a few days first. When I'm done with my business, I'll come and pick you up. How about that? Mo Qinggu cheered. Teacher is a great person. Buluqing smiled dotingly and nodded at Chu Yang. His gaze was a little complicated as he shouted, Little one, if you dare to bully my disciple, I'll castrate you alive. Chu Yang was about to reply when he saw that Buluqing had already turned into a ray of light and disappeared from the room. This person is not bad. Xiexing said to Chu Yang. Chu Yang pondered and said, Regarding this, I have a question. I'll discuss it with you later. He shook his head and said, I'm not mature yet. Xiexing knew that since Chu Yang said so, it must be a very serious question. She nodded and promised, The things you're thinking about are always very complicated. I can't guarantee that I'll solve them for you, but I'll try my best to clear your doubts. Chu Yang said, Okay. At this moment, Dong Wushang's eyes lit up and he exclaimed, This? Xiaowu? Isn't this Xiaowu? Rui Butong also recognized her. The 2 of them were overjoyed at once, and were about to pounce on her. Mo Qinggu took a step back and said, Brother Wushang, Brother Butong, you can't hug me. Dong Wushang said jokingly, Why, only your brother Chu Yang can hug you and we can't. Why? Mo Qinggu snorted and said, Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Dong Wushang and Rui Butong laughed so hard that they swayed back and forth. At this moment, Chu Luo walked out from Xiexing's side and took Chu Yang's hand. She asked with a hint of hostility, Big brother, who is this? Mo Qinggu immediately felt a sense of hostility. She had innate spirit meridians, and was especially sensitive to this kind of aura. She couldn't help but hug Chu Yang's other arm and asked, "Brother Chu Yang, who is she?" There was actually a hint of jealousy and hostility in her voice. The two little girls, one hugging the left arm and the other hugging the right arm, looked at each other with hostility across Chu Yang. Chu Lu felt that her status was being attacked. Mo Qinggu felt that her status as the first wife was being threatened. The jealousy revealed by the two little girls at this moment was actually very strong. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. He didn't expect the two little girls to start fighting the moment they met. He hurriedly explained, Okay, stop fooling around, let me introduce you." Before he finished, Chu Lu already interrupted. "I call him Big Brother. Who do you think I am to him?" Mo Qinggu pouted and said, I also call him Brother Chu Yang. Who do you think I am?" The two little girls didn't give way to each other. They glared at each other, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Chu Yang looked at Zi Xiecheng for help, but Zi Xiecheng tilted her head to one side and looked at Dong Wuxiang. The three of them looked as if they were watching a show. When they saw Chu Yang looking over, the three of them turned their heads toward the ceiling at the same time. Wan Renjie and the others held back their laughter and watched the show. Wei Wuyan sat at one side lifelessly. He didn't speak or move. Nangong Shifeng and his brothers laughed dryly and actually said, "I need to pee." The brothers all needed to pee and left quickly. Chu Yang was sweating profusely. What kind of people are they? Can't they see that I'm in pain now? Just as he was about to explain Chu Luer's identity, Chu Luer pinched his waist. He didn't dare to use his energy for fear of hurting her hand, so he grimaced in pain. "Why are you pinching my brother Chu Yang?" Mo Qingwu was unhappy. "Try pinching yourself. Don't you know pain?" Chu Luer said, "I like to pinch him, so what? Is your heart aching? What right do you have to feel heartache?" Mo Qingwu was dumbfounded. Chu Luer narrowed her eyes and said, "You like him? You're so young and you actually like someone?" Mo Qingwu's face instantly turned red. Although her temper was soft with a hint of toughness, her nature was pure and honest, and even a little simple and adorable. She was thin-skinned to begin with, so when she heard Chu Luer's words, she couldn't take it anymore. Chu Luer, on the other hand, was very scheming. This girl had been bedridden all these years, and her body had not grown much. Although she hadn't grown much, she was very cunning. Once she saw Mo Qingwu's expression, she immediately guessed it. When she saw Chu Yang's doting expression, she immediately knew that things were not good. Chu Luer naturally had a sister-in-law candidate in mind. Of course, it was the peerless beauty Zi Xiecheng. At this moment, seeing a girl about her age actually coveting the position of sister-in-law, she felt very uncomfortable. She rolled her eyes and immediately felt a little uncomfortable. She said, "But he already has me. Even if you marry him, you can only be a concubine." Mo Qingwu let out an ah and said in disbelief, "You? How is this possible?" Chu Luer was furious. She said, "Why is it impossible?" Mo Qingwu looked at Chu Luer, who was half a head shorter than her, and said with a face full of suspicion, "Brother Chu Yang probably won't like someone like you." Chu Luer exploded. She made threatening gestures and said, "What's wrong with me being like this?" Mo Qingwu shook her head and said earnestly, "Little girl, you're still young. Don't make such a joke. Even if Brother Chu Yang wants to marry, he can only marry a beautiful girl like me. Someone like you, who's covered with bean sprouts that haven't even grown yet, would hurt my hand when I touch you. Brother Chu Yang won't like you. If you're really persistent, come back a few years later when you've grown up. When the time comes, beg me and I can make the decision to take you in as a concubine for Brother Chu Yang." When she said this, Chu Yang was really dumbfounded. Not only him, even Dong Wuxiang, Zi Xiecheng and the others also looked at Mo Qingwu in disbelief. They didn't expect this little girl to actually say such things. As for feeling like a bean sprout, that was a joke that Chu Yang had made with Mo Qingwu back then. They didn't expect this girl to remember it until now. Dong Wuxiang and the others naturally knew that Mo Qingwu had always been ambitious towards Chu Yang. Back then, on the way to the far north wastelands, Mo Qingwu had once said, "Can I be your sister-in-law?" At that time, everyone only thought that the little girl was joking. But now the little girl was 13. She was still infatuated with him. The words above were actually extremely powerful, even if they were to be used as a counterattack. It made Chulur teary-eyed and speechless. Mo Qingwu's heart softened a little. She comforted her. When you grow up, you'll still have a chance. Chulur said angrily. Who needs your comfort? Mo Qingwu hugged Chu Yang's arm proudly and said, So, you still have to learn from me and everything. Chulur snorted. Chu Yang hurriedly explained with a wry smile. Qingwu, this is Chulur, my second uncle's daughter, my younger sister. Mo Qingwu cried out in surprise. Your younger sister? She was instantly filled with regret. Damn, I was wondering why she was so fierce. So it's little aunt. If little aunt objects, things will be really bad. Mo Qingwu was still young, but she was deeply in love with Chu Yang. Moreover, there seemed to be an inexplicable feeling that was guiding her. This is the one for her in this life. Mo Qingwu was young, but she was deeply in love with Chu Yang. Moreover, there seemed to be an inexplicable feeling guiding her. This is the one for her in this life. And Chu Yang was also very meticulous towards her, even to the extent of disregarding his own safety. Over time, Mo Qingwu had already positioned herself as Chu Yang's wife, and regarded herself as such. Chu Luer said angrily, Who's your little aunt? As she spoke, she ran to Zi Xieching's side and shook her. Big sister-in-law, look. This little girl actually wants to snatch your position. 700 additional chapters. I can't write any more today. My brain is a mess and I have a splitting headache. I need 3 more chapters. After double the monthly votes, I'll update double the chapters. Thank you everyone. And I beg for monthly votes. G. To be continued. Chapter 1062. Mo Qingwu exclaimed again. She looked at Chu Yang with tears in her eyes and said, Brother Chu Yang, is this your wife? Chu Yang smiled bitterly and spread his hands. He said jokingly, Your brother Chu Yang doesn't have a wife yet. I want to marry her, but she doesn't want to. She doesn't like me, so I can only give up. Mo Qingwu perked up and said excitedly, I like you. Chu Yang laughed and beamed. Luckily, there's still little Wu who likes me. Mo Qingwu smiled sweetly. The tips of her brows and the corners of her eyes immediately lit up. On the other side, Chu Luer was shaking Zi Xieching. Zi Xieching was silent for a while and said, Luer, don't mess around. It won't be good if there's a misunderstanding. She turned her head and sized up Mo Qingwu with a warm gaze. Her eyes suddenly exposed a strange look. There was shock, and also some complex emotions. This little girl in front of her actually had innate spirit meridians. Heavenly body and innate spirit meridians. No wonder Bu Luqing treated this little girl like a treasure. Such a physique was truly unique in the heavenly layer. This is Big Sister Z, Chu Yang explained. Big Sister Z. Hello. Mo Qingwu looked at Zi Xieching timidly. She could feel the tyrannical aura from Zi Xieching that filled the entire world. Hello. Zi Xieching smiled gently. What a beautiful little girl. If you grow up, you'll be the most beautiful girl in the world. She took Mo Qingwu's hand and looked at her carefully. She said, Since we've met, it must be fate. Mo Qingwu. Mo Qingwu, one dance moves the heavens. What a good name, the heavens. No matter how you dance. Red clothes like blood, dancing the heavens. She laughed. Since we've met, and you've called me Big Sister, then I'll give you a gift. She frowned slightly. There was a light purple energy moving around her body. Then, Zi Xieching raised her hand gently. Her white jade-like finger touched Mo Qingwu's forehead. Mo Qingwu only felt a wave of unfamiliar information burrowing into her mind. Zi Xieching retracted her finger and took 2 steps back. She panted slightly and smiled. Chu Yang looked at her with a questioning gaze. Zi Xieching smiled faintly and said, Her 2 masters have laid a very solid foundation for her. So solid that it's terrifying to the point that she can practice martial arts on such a foundation. Any cultivation technique was a piece of cake for him. However, those 2 were the ones who couldn't get out. Therefore, Mo Qingwu cultivated according to their cultivation methods. At the end of the road, you can only reach the level of those 2. Even if you surpass them, you will still be limited by the heavens. That's why I gave her a set of cultivation method incantations. When her cultivation breaks through the boundary between immortal and mortal, she will be able to activate this set of incantations to cultivate a more powerful martial art. Zi Xiecheng looked at Chu Yang deeply. If you want her to accompany you as you traverse the heavens and dance the heavenly palaces, she'll only have the capital if she has this cultivation technique. Moving unhindered above the heavens, dancing in the heavens? Chu Yang repeated in a murmur. Zi Xiecheng said with a half-smile. Of course, the heavenly palaces I'm talking about are not this heavenly continent. Chu Yang pondered and said, Big Sister Zi means that we have to rush out of this world. Go to another plane? Zi Xiecheng turned her face away and ignored him. However, he still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. So he snorted heavily. This snort. It was really impressive. Chu Yang heard this snort and just shrunk his neck. But there were others outside who also heard this snort. Their hearts trembled instantly. The auction outside was still going on. At this moment, the Xiao clan, Chu clan and Chen clan were bidding for a 10,000-year-old black blood crystal lotus. At this moment, the Chen clan had already bid 50,000 purple crystals and a large piece of nightmare silver, worth about 40,000 purple crystals. The highest value of this 10,000-year-old black blood crystal lotus was only 50,000 purple crystals. Logically speaking, 50,000 purple crystals and the nightmare silver worth 40,000 purple crystals had already far exceeded its original value. The auctioneer was already counting down and ready to drop the hammer. But at this moment, from the box that everyone was paying close attention to, a voice that made the big clans tremble suddenly sounded. Snort. The second grandmaster of the Chen clan, Chen Mengqi, was in a predicament. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Big sister, I've already offered double the price. What are you still snorting for? Helpless, he could only wave his hands with tears in his eyes. That younger brother of the Chen clan almost cried as he hurriedly shouted. The Chen clan offers 100,000 purple crystals and a piece of nightmare silver. This sentence was just in time. That auctioneer was counting. 1, 2. When the Chen clan said this sentence, the auctioneer could no longer stop his mouth and continued to count. 3 sold. Boom. The hammer fell. After it fell, he realized that he seemed to be a little too anxious. But in the box there was really no more snorting. Although Chen Mengqi felt the pinch, he also heaved a sigh of relief. That was really close. If Chen Mengqi knew that the powerful existence snorted just to spite someone, what would he think? Just for a snort, the Chen clan had thrown out 50,000 purple crystals for nothing. Zi Xiecheng had also created a precedent in the heavens. Just a snort was worth 50,000 purple crystals. The auction was still going on. Elixirs were continuously brought out. Zi Xiecheng also stopped snorting. But with the lesson from the Chen clan this time, no one dared to lower the price. They became even more spirited. But in fact, everyone was already distracted. Especially since Mo Qingwu had suddenly appeared. She had shouted elder brother Chu Yang, which had shaken the entire hall. Moreover, she had rushed over with tears of joy. The name Chu Yang had suddenly become more and more important in the eyes of the big clans. His sister was the disciple of a super powerful expert. Ning Tianya and Bu Liuqing's younger brother were so attached to him. Just these two things were enough to make the hearts of the experts palpitate. And with Chu Yang's appearance this time, there were a few more experts under him. With 3 super powerful experts as his backing, the worried looks on the faces of the supreme martial artists became more and more intense. They could imagine that it was another superpower. It was about to rise in this heaven's continent. It was unstoppable. But his rise would definitely cut off a huge piece of meat from the current situation of the big clans. This proved that the big clans were declining. And this situation was intolerable to the big clans. Yidi's face darkened. He pondered for a long time and said, Shiyu, go and inform the big clans. After the auction, the Yi clan will host a banquet to invite the second grandmaster of the various clans to give an explanation to the big clans about the battle that night. Yi Shiyu bowed and replied, yes. Then he walked out. Yi Di looked at Yi Shiyu's figure walking out with a complicated gaze. Finally, his gaze darkened, as if he had made up his mind about something. He gritted his teeth lightly, and his eyes became two dark and deep pits. The faces of the elders of the big clans also darkened. The scene where Mo Qingwu's red figure dashed towards Chu Yang. These people all saw it. Mo Qingwu of course didn't know what kind of intense shock it brought to the big clans when she flew over with her true feelings. What was even more unexpected was that she flew over in public. It almost set the pattern for the heavens. But this pounce made the big clans wary at the same time, because there were two supreme martial artists behind her that no one dared to provoke, Ning Tianya and Buluqing. She pounced over, which was equivalent to the two supreme martial artists falling over too. How big the impact was. After receiving Yi Di's message, the second grandmasters were all relieved. They all expressed their agreement. After the auction, they would definitely go over and accept Yi Di's explanation. Actually, everyone knew in their hearts. The Yi clan was the pure victim of what happened that night. They needed the big clans to entertain them. Why would they take the initiative to give an explanation to the big clans? Yi Di's explanation was just a reason, a pretext. The real explanation at this banquet. It was definitely something else, Chu Yang's matter. Following that, the elixirs in the auction came one after another. They were all bought back by the big clans at a high price that was definitely beyond their value. While their hearts were bleeding from the pain, they threw away money without a change in expression. They even pretended to be happy. This kind of auction was definitely unimaginable to anyone who saw it. People who had not experienced it would definitely not be able to understand this feeling. This auction also broke the record of the highest transaction amount in the heavenly layer continent in the past 100,000 years. Not to mention those rare items. Just the purple crystals alone were worth a total of 5 million pieces. If the big clans knew that the real owner of these elixirs was not Zi Xiecheng, but Chu Yang, if they knew that these purple crystals had actually fallen into Chu Yang's hands, if they knew that Chu Yang was their biggest enemy, the Tribulation Sword Master, the 8 second grandmasters would probably have the thought of cutting their own throats on the spot. Many years later, this auction would become a legend in the heavenly layer. Countless records were created. An auction with the highest number of elixirs. An auction with the highest number of experts participating in the auction. An auction with the most grievances in history. An auction with the highest transaction amount. The host was as rigid as a zombie, but on the surface, it was the auction with the most enthusiastic atmosphere. An auction with the most money spent in vain. An auction with the most spendthrifts. An auction with the most spendthrifts, even though they knew clearly in their hearts. Of course, the most important one was the auction where the last Tribulation Sword Master completely rose to power. Because all the income from this auction went into the pockets of the Tribulation Sword Master. With this financial foundation, the Tribulation Sword Master's wealth had already surpassed any big clan. Such a strong foundation supported the Tribulation Sword Master and his brothers to advance their cultivation and trample on the heavenly layer. In the end, they even rushed out of the heavenly layer, including elixirs, wealth, cultivation, and the final form of weapons. This auction was the biggest contributor. And the most ironic thing was that these items all came from the big clans that were the arch-enemies of the Tribulation Sword Master. And they were willing to take them out themselves. This kind of supernatural and unimaginable thing caused everyone who heard it to involuntarily spit out a mouthful of blood. When I woke up in the afternoon, I called Air Jen and was lectured by him. Cough cough, I didn't think it through. I was only thinking about the annual monthly votes list. It was indeed a little wrong. Cough cough. Extremely awkward. It's all in the past. You don't need to care about it. One phone call, and we talked for almost an hour. The content was more cheerful. Of course, the most cheerful thing was that the guy was talking nonstop on the phone, when he suddenly stopped talking. I was puzzled, and then I heard someone hurriedly explaining to someone. It's a guy. It's really a guy. What's so strange about talking for a long time? Soaring Wind is really a guy. Oh my god, it's really a guy. I spat on the spot. Then, I pinched my nose and snorted twice. It's said that the guy is in a terrible fix right now. Chapter 1063. But then, something even more shocking happened. When the auction was nearing its end, 3 people walked out of Heaven Room 3. Yu Lingxue, Feng Yuro, and their disciple Wu Qianqian walked toward Mortal Room 3. Even someone as calm as the Night Tharch widened his eyes at that moment. As for the others, they were even more shocked. Someone was just about to exclaim, when his mouth was covered by the person beside him. Yu Lingxue walked to the door of Mortal Room 3 and stopped. Then he asked, "Elder, may we enter?" Inside, that cold female voice said, "Please." Then, the Moon Breeze couple walked in with their disciple. Once they went in, they didn't come out. They didn't come out all the way until the auction ended. The hearts of those from the big clans instantly became heavy. Yi Di stared at Mortal Room 3 with a heavy heart. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, he stood up and walked toward Heaven Room 1. This auction that was so lively that it was almost suffocating finally came to an end. The big clans left the auction house almost without looking back, as if they were running away. There wasn't even the slightest bit of excitement from returning with a full load. Every one of them looked gloomy, as if someone in their family had died. Chu Yang and the rest naturally stayed behind. Under the invitation of the 5th elder of the Medicine Valley, Chu Yang came to the warehouse of the auction house very proudly. The moment he entered, he was dazzled by the brilliant purple light all over the floor. Such a huge warehouse was actually almost filled to the brim with purple crystals, and all kinds of rare minerals exchanged this time. Chu Yang only felt dazzled. Rubbing his hands, he said, "These are all mine?" The 5th elder looked at him with a complicated expression. Then, he looked at the pile of purple crystals in front of him and nodded. "As long as you fulfill your promise to the Medicine Valley, these are all yours." Chu Yang was stunned. "Promise? What promise? Can't you just deduct it directly from the auction quota?" Back then, Chu Yang had promised that as long as the Medicine Valley hosted this auction, apart from the auction commission, he would sell to the Medicine Valley 1/10 of the medicines auctioned this time. The 5th elder looked a little embarrassed. "I don't know what happened. All of the medicines were auctioned off. Our Medicine Valley thought that we had kept it, but after the auction, we realized that we didn't keep it at all. Now we don't even have a single stock of spirit herb left. We've sold them all." At this moment, the zombie-faced auctioneer also walked over and said rigidly, "It's me." I bid smoothly, and then I kept urging them, while the 5th elder and the great elder were discussing something. After they were done, the 5th elder and the great elder were discussing something. Only then did I realize that I didn't keep it for myself. Chu Yang fainted. "How could there be such a thing? You just casually took all the photos?" He even auctioned off his own share. He was the best. Chu Yang retreated in defeat. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Then what do you mean?" The 5th elder stammered, I think we can." Chu Yang looked at the old man patiently. He encouraged, "Speak boldly." The 5th elder finally said, "We don't want the commission from the auction either. We'll exchange it for the elixirs. Then, we'll fork out money to buy your elixirs, cough cough. 100 stocks? No. 50 stocks would do too. Of course. The precondition is that you still have spirit herbs in hand." The 5th elder's face was full of anticipation. If at this moment Chu Yang said, "I don't have any more, I'll give it all to you," the 5th elder would probably smash his head against the wall and die on the spot. Generally, the commission from an auction was based on a 5% commission. Don't underestimate this 5%. If Chu Yang's current transaction amount were to include those minerals and metals, the total value was more than 120 million. 5% would be 1 million purple crystals. It was definitely a terrifyingly large number. There was such a good deal. He didn't want the commission anymore. Exchange it for the elixirs? Chu Yang frowned and said, "There are still some elixirs. However, the 5th elder must also know. What I say doesn't count." The 5th elder felt relieved, and his whole body relaxed. He said, "It's good that there are elixirs. Of course, that friend of yours, that almighty person is here. We also know that. Naturally, we won't let you suffer a loss in terms of price." Chu Yang said apologetically, "I'm really sorry." The 5th elder comforted him. "It's nothing. It's not up to you." Chu Yang said sincerely, "You're right." He sighed. "Currently, there are less than 300 elixirs left. There's no harm in selling them all to you. In Chu Yang's conflicted space, the elixirs from the Black Blood Forest naturally wouldn't be just these 300 elixirs. Speaking of which, there were still 3,000 elixirs. But how could he tell the truth? However, this batch of elixirs was originally reserved for my own use. Therefore, they are more high-end. In terms of price, it will also. Chu Yang deliberated and said, "So, you have to be mentally prepared." The fifth elder became excited. No problem. No problem. He thought to himself that this was really a blessing in disguise. How could the elixirs that he had left be ordinary? They would definitely be top-grade treasures. He didn't expect that there would be such benefits after selling them all. As for the price, there's even less of a problem. Our Medicine Valley has collected countless purple crystals over the years. They'll rot if left to rot. We'll take as much as you have. The fifth elder said heartily. Chu Yang was delighted. This old man was really cute. He was stretching his neck to be taken advantage of just like that. And he even revealed an important piece of news. Who knows how many purple crystals there are? They'll rot if left to rot. Unlucky. Since they're already rotting, it'll be a waste if I don't spend some on your behalf. I'll go and ask for instructions. After Chu Yang said this, he rushed out in a hurry. Then, he went to the private room and walked out again. He went back to the warehouse. No problem. That senior said that as long as the price doesn't disappoint her, there's no problem. The fifth elder's face twitched. He thought to himself, that woman is really greedy. Even the big clans buy elixirs at double the price. Don't disappoint her then. Does this mean that she wants double the price too? That's too expensive. Brother Chu, please take out the elixirs first. Let's see what you think. The fifth elder asked. No problem. Chu Yang waved his hand readily. Instantly, a huge pile of elixirs scattered on the ground. Around them, the people of the Medicine Valley swarmed over like a swarm of bees. At once, there were endless exclamations. The elixirs that Chu Yang took out this time were definitely of a higher grade than those that were auctioned previously. The fifth elder's hands trembled. His face flushed red with excitement, and then turned snowy white. His body swayed and he sat down on his butt moaning. He said, "So many good things." Chu Yang smiled and said, "There are 310 of them." Since he said that there were only 300 plus, he couldn't take out too much. Chu Yang also regretted it. He might as well sell more. He could only say 310. Within 400, it was also 300 plus. 310. The fifth elder's face twitched again. Even if one elixir was calculated at 100,000 purple crystals, it was still 3,100,000 purple crystals. And this was just his own estimate of the market price. That woman wanted double the price. The Medicine Valley did have a lot of purple crystals, but if they took out 80 million purple crystals at once, they would probably owe a huge debt. From then on, the people of the Medicine Valley would have to beg for food. Chu Yang observed the situation. Knowing that the Medicine Valley probably couldn't handle this batch of elixirs in one go, he smiled and said, "That senior originally wanted double the price. Or double and a half." The fifth elder looked like he was struck by lightning. Double and a half. Damn it, how was he supposed to live? Chu Yang changed his tone and said, "However, I argued with that senior on what was right. I said if not for the Medicine Valley's organization, it would really be difficult for us to sell these elixirs. Even if we did sell them, we wouldn't be able to fetch such a high price." The fifth elder nodded repeatedly. Yes. And then, what did that senior say? Chu Yang said, that senior said, although what you said made sense. But the Medicine Valley also earned 1 million purple crystals from selling this batch of elixirs. They didn't lose out. The fifth elder said dejectedly, a mere million. Thinking about it, what the other party said made sense. Although the selling price was high, the Medicine Valley's commission had also increased. What was wrong with that? He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Chu Yang said, "At that time, I said that I was being ungrateful. They did help us after all. This, no matter what, we should at least give them some face, right?" The fifth elder blinked his small eyes and looked at Chu Yang. Then that senior said, "Since that's the case, then this batch of elixirs can be sold according to the market price. However, the change has to be made up. In other words, she only needs 40 million purple crystals. In addition, after deducting the 1 million purple crystals from the auction procedures, in reality, the Medicine Valley only needs to pay 34 million purple crystals to get all these elixirs back. Chu Yang said sanctimoniously. They were clearly only worth this price. But Chu Yang had gone a few rounds, and now that he said this, it was as if he was doing the Medicine Valley a huge favor. Really? The fifth elder asked incredulously, saving more than half in one go. He was so happy that he almost fainted. 34 million purple crystals was an incomparably huge sum, but the Medicine Valley could still afford it. Although it would hurt them a little, it wouldn't shake their foundation. Most importantly, with these elixirs, the Medicine Valley's reputation would only grow bigger and bigger. Wasn't it easy to earn purple crystals? Really? Chu Yang nodded affirmatively. That's great, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This sum of money is no problem, no problem. The fifth elder was almost jumping for joy. His gaze was also full of eagerness and gratitude as he looked at Chu Yang, making Chu Yang shiver. 34 million purple crystals. I'll pay immediately. I. Quickly go find the Valley Master. Quickly go find the High Priest, and get the storage ring from him. Bring all the purple crystals over, bring it over. The fifth elder shouted, hurry, as if he was afraid that the Almighty would change his mind if he was too late. He grabbed Chu Yang's hand with tears of gratitude, and shook it vigorously. Brother Chu, your great kindness. Aye. The Medicine Valley will forever remember it in our hearts. I hereby make a promise. The doors of the Medicine Valley will always be open for you. I'm so grateful to you. To be continued. Chapter 1064. When Chu Yang left the warehouse of the auction house, it was definitely a fruitful trip. In the tribulation space, the warehouse specially opened by the Sword Spirit to store purple crystals was completely full. The Sword Spirit had no choice but to open up another big warehouse to store purple crystals. In the tribulation space, all kinds of rare minerals were piled up like mountains. The tribulation sword was devouring them crazily. But even at such a crazy speed, Chu Yang estimated that it would take at least 3 to 5 days for it to finish. The elixir garden in the tribulation space didn't expand much, but the medicine for Chu Luer's treatment had been gathered. Chu Yang finally had one less thing on his mind. He planned to treat Chu Luer's injuries and recover her body after he went back tonight, and then cultivate as soon as possible. During this period of time, Zi Xieching had been laying the foundation for Chu Luer. Once her body recovered, and she started cultivating, with the help of Zi Xieching's heaven-defying ability, Chu Luer would probably be able to create a cultivation miracle. After returning to the private room, Zhang Xian said a few words, and everyone stood up and walked out. Feng Yuro, Yu Lingxue and Wu Qianqian followed behind. Because Zi Xieching had sent them an invitation, the Feng and Yu couple naturally wouldn't give up such an opportunity. As for Wu Qianqian, the more time she spent with Chu Yang the better. How could she disagree? Along the way, Mo Qinggu hung on Chu Yang's arm, chatting and laughing as they walked. She was full of joy along the way. Wu Qianqian walked behind, looking enviously at Mo Qinggu's arm hanging on Chu Yang's arm. She was in a daze. Wu Qianqian still didn't realize that this little girl in front of her was the key to her and Chu Yang's relationship. She only thought that the relationship between Chu Yang and Mo Qinggu was probably similar to that of brother and sister. However, who would have known that the entanglement between the two of them would not simply be a relationship of brother and sister? When Chu Yang walked out of the auction house, he was suddenly stunned. There was a person standing in front of him with a smile. Smiling, looking at Chu Yang. His green robe fluttered, 3 wisps of beard, hands behind his back, looking indescribably confident and relaxed. Calm and collected. That kind of aura of having the world in his hands was clearly reflected. Diwu Qingru. Chu Yang's heart shook. Diwu Qingru smiled slightly. Chu Yang let go of Mo Qinggu's embrace and motioned for everyone to wait for a moment. He walked over. Waiting for me? Chu Yang asked with a smile. Waiting for you. Diwu Qingru smiled faintly. Both of them chuckled. Congratulations. Diwu Qingru said. You have finally gained a foothold in the upper three heavens. Thanks a lot. Chu Yang smiled. I'm not as stable as you. Diwu Qingro shook his head and smiled bitterly. One sentence. Chu Yang listened attentively. Don't underestimate any enemy, Diwu Qingro insipidly said. The enemy's foundation is much stronger than what you've seen. Chu Yang nodded solemnly. We cooperated a few days ago, but we didn't succeed, Diwu Qingro insipidly said. However, next time, let's plan properly. Chu Yang nodded. He said, That's right. We need to plan carefully. Diwu Qingro smiled. He turned around and walked away. After a few steps, he disappeared into the surging crowd. Chu Yang stood there and chewed carefully. After a long time, he shook his head and smiled, turning back. That person is Diwu Qingro? Zi Xiecheng asked softly. Yes, Chu Yang said. He is indeed not simple, Zi Xiecheng said meaningfully. You have to be careful when dealing with this person. Chu Yang nodded and said, Our interactions are only in Tianji City. After this, it will be the ends of the world and the corners of the sea. If Tianji doesn't come, I won't scheme against him anymore. Zi Xiecheng smiled and said, That's right. Your strength lies in being calculative. But this person is full of tricks. Therefore, if you were to compete with him on one matter, you would definitely be able to win. However, when it comes to the overall situation, you might not necessarily be his opponent. How could Chu Yang not know this? If it was only one matter, no matter which aspect of his scheming, he would not be weaker than Diwu Qingro. But if it was 10 matters or 10 matters at the same time, then the only one who could go against Diwu Qingro at the same time and be well organized in all aspects was Mo Tianji. Zi Xiecheng turned back and said to Yu Lingxue, Brother Yu, please make a trip and invite Supreme Martial Artist Bu to the Orchard Palace. Yu Lingxue said, Okay. The white figure disappeared without a trace in an instant. What? Chu Yang asked, puzzled. There are some things that I want to talk about while there is still a chance. Zi Xiecheng smiled lightly. Her heart was extremely complicated. She thought to herself, You fool. I am making the best use of my time to pave the way for your future before I leave. The power of the Tao state is getting stronger and stronger. Now even when I am not fighting, I can already vaguely feel the power of the Tao state in the vast sky. Who knows when it will leave? I can only do my best. If I can do one more thing for you, I will do one more thing. Chu Yang was silent for a while. As if he could feel Zi Xiecheng's feelings, he finally asked bitterly, Can't you not leave? Zi Xiecheng's heart softened and ached. She forcibly suppressed her emotions and shook her head coldly. No. Chu Yang lowered his head and did not speak anymore. Mo Qinggu asked Chu Yang quietly, Is big sister Zi leaving? Chu Yang sighed and held her little hand. He said, In life, there is no banquet that doesn't end. His voice was filled with melancholy. Zi Xiecheng's ears twitched, and she felt a sharp pain in her heart. But she floated forward expressionlessly and walked to the front of the group to lead the way. Mo Qinggu blinked and said, Does brother Chu Yang want big sister Zi to stay? Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said, Yes, I'm also very conflicted. I want her to stay. If she stays, I am afraid there will be danger. Very great danger? Mo Qinggu asked. Very great danger. Her life is in danger. Chu Yang sighed again. Brother Chu Yang, you like her? Mo Qinggu asked a little dejectedly. Chu Yang did not deny it. He nodded and said seriously, But brother Chu Yang still likes Qinggu the most. Mo Qinggu said happily. Then I am relieved. Suddenly, she pulled Chu Yang's head. She put her petal-like lips close to his ear and said, If brother Chu Yang really does not want big sister Zi to leave, I have a way. Chu Yang asked curiously, What way? Mo Qinggu bit her lips and hesitated for a while. Finally she said softly, If you do it with her, how will she leave? Chu Yang staggered. He felt that his legs had gone soft, and he almost fell to the ground. Zi Xiecheng, who was walking at the front of the group, also staggered. Then her delicate ears turned red. She walked forward quickly. Feng Yuro, who was walking beside her, was very strange. She asked, Elder, what's wrong? Zi Xiecheng exhaled. She said, Nothing, haha. She walked forward quickly. Chu Yang knocked on Mo Qingwu's head and said in a low voice, "You evil little girl. Where did you hear such a mess?" Mo Qingwu giggled. She cried out in pain and said, "Master found me a masseuse. We often chat." "Masseuse? Male or female?" Chu Yang was nervous. "Of course it's a female." Mo Qingwu stared at him with her mischievous eyes. She smiled like a little fox who had succeeded. "Brother Chu Yang, I often tell her about you. Ha ha ha." Speaking of this, she suddenly blushed. It turned out that after she got familiar with that masseuse, because Mo Qingwu talked about Chu Yang every day, the masseuse said one day, "You bastard. If you are worried, when you grow up, you can do it with him first. Then you won't be able to run away." Now Mo Qingwu was thinking about this. She thought, when can I have the capital to do it with brother Chu Yang first? After turning a corner, Nangong Shifeng and the others bade farewell to Chu Yang. After this auction, there would definitely be some movements. The Nangong brothers needed to keep an eye on them and find out the latest information at any time. To be able to make this trip in this lifetime, I can hold my head high, Nangong Shifeng said. It could be seen that he was in a good mood. I, Nangong Shifeng, have never been so glorious and glorious in my life. Today, I have fulfilled the wish of my whole life, haha. Chu Yang was silent. After a long while he said lightly, "You will be even more glorious in the future. Shifeng, after the medicine banquet ends, I will help you and your brothers recover." Nangong Shifeng's eyes turned hot. He held Chu Yang's hand and shook it gratefully. Without saying anything, he turned around and left with his brothers. "I'll follow and take a look. To prevent any mishaps." Wei Wuyan said goodbye to Chu Yang silently and followed them. Since coming here, Chu Yang had been racking his brains to think of ways to help Wei Wuyan recover. However, Wei Wuyan's mood became more and more depressed, and he became even more silent. Everyone could see that there was a sense of lifelessness in his body. Zi Xiecheng could only sigh about this. Wei Wuyan's heart was dead. Now there were only two goals left in his mind: to take revenge and to repay kindness. To take revenge for his wife and children, and to repay Chu Yang for saving his life. Other than these, he had no other wishes. Once he thought that these two wishes were fulfilled, Wei Wuyan would not hesitate to kill him at any time. Regarding this, Chu Yang was helpless. "Let's follow and take a look." Wan Renjie saw Chu Yang's worry and said, "All right." Chu Yang said, "Don't let him do anything stupid." Wan Renjie laughed and said, "Fourth brother, let's take a look at Wei Wuyan for a while. If he needs it, we want to accompany him to travel the world to fulfill his last wish. Later, if there's nothing else, I'm afraid we'll leave together. We'll accompany him to travel the world to take revenge. We don't feel at ease if he's alone." Wan Renjie smiled and said, "We don't have any ties with Wei Wuyan. Perhaps only old bachelors like us can understand each other's hearts. We don't have any other wishes. As brothers, Wei Wuyan's wish is our wish." Chapter 1065. Wan Renjie and Wei Wuyan had fought for half a generation, and had fought to the death dozens of times, but they appreciated each other. Wan Renjie could empathize with Wei Wuyan's feelings. Wei Wuyan wanted revenge, and Wan Renjie had long decided to help him fulfill his wish. As they were of the same age, Wan Renjie deeply understood Wei Wuyan's feelings. Chu Yang was startled and said, "Okay." He knew that Wan Renjie was bidding him farewell by saying this. Chu Yang was grateful that these three people came to help him, but he could also tell that these three people really couldn't relax in front of Zi Xiecheng, Buluqing and Moon Breeze. They couldn't be compared to Dong Wushang and the others. Dong Wushang and the others' cultivations weren't low, but they were still young. But Wan Renjie and the other two were already very old. They wanted to put down their pride, but they couldn't. They wanted to ask for advice, but they were also embarrassed. As time passed, they felt more and more awkward and wanted to leave. "But if you have free time, please remember to come and visit me," Chu Yang said seriously. "Of course." Wan Renjie's eyes revealed deep emotions. He said in a deep voice, "Brother, if you're well, maybe we won't see each other in our lives. But if you're in trouble, we'll come and accompany you even if we have to risk our lives." He saw the worry in Chu Yang's eyes. He patted Chu Yang's shoulder and smiled. We're all old loaches in the martial world. You don't have to worry about us. If we only want to stay alive, even Supreme Martial Artist Bu will have a hard time finding us. Haha. Chu Yang forced a smile. He took out 4 incomplete versions of heavy pills and handed them over. He whispered, "If you have life-threatening injuries, take this. There's one more. For Wei Wuyan." Wan Renjia looked at him deeply, and his eyes showed signs of turning red. But he quickly turned his head away and laughed. "Since that's the case, I'll accept it." He stretched out his arms and gave Chu Yang a big hug. He patted Chu Yang's back and said, "Fourth brother, take care." Then, Cheng Duiying stepped forward. He smiled slightly. "Fourth brother." He turned around and left. He wanted to say something, but just as the words were about to leave his mouth, his heart ached, and he couldn't say anything. He decided not to say anything, and just turned around and left. Bao Buhuan hugged Chu Yang tightly and said, "Fourth brother, what big brother said is what I want to say." Chu Yang was startled. Suddenly his heart ached. "Brother, if you're doing well, perhaps we'll never see each other again. But if you're in trouble, even if we have to risk our lives, we'll come and accompany you." The 3 of them bade farewell to Chu Luer. Wan Renjia caressed Chu Luer's hair. For a long time, he didn't say anything. He wanted to say something, but he held it back. But he forced himself to hold back. Finally, he let out a long sigh and said softly, "Luer, you must be happy." Chu Luer's eyes reddened, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Wan Renjia looked at her lovingly and wiped away her tears. He chuckled, but his voice was trembling. He wanted to say, "If I have a great-granddaughter who looks like you, Luer, you let me taste true kinship and remind me of the beautiful memories of the past. I'm really grateful to you." But, in the end, he didn't say anything. "Everyone, the wind is cold today. In the future, we'll definitely meet again if we're fated. The 3 of us will take our leave now." Wan Renjia clasped his fists towards the crowd and turned to leave. The figures of the 3 of them walked further and further away, but they never looked back. Chu Yang watched the 3 of them leave, turned into a street and disappeared. Suddenly, he felt that a dividing line had appeared in his life. Here, the current him was cut off from the him, who had just arrived at the upper 3 heavens. It had come to an end. There's bound to be separation in life. Zi Xiecheng sensed his disappointment and said, "Actually, it's a good thing that they left. The cultivation of these 3 people isn't very high, and their meridians are almost solidified, and there's almost no room for improvement. If they followed you sooner or later, they'd be implicated by you and lose their lives. Now that they've left, you should be happy for them." Chu Yang was shocked. Then, he smiled bitterly and said, "I've also thought of this point, but the feelings in my heart have never left. In the eyes of the world, the 3 of them aren't good people, but they're really good to me and Luer." Zi Xiecheng smiled lightly and said, "Good people and bad people. Can we really distinguish them in this world?" "We can," Chu Yang said seriously. "In my heart, law enforcement officers like Han Xiaoran are good people. And some people who are sincere, even if they're enemies, even if they want to be killed, they're also good people. Of course, those who are good to us are even more good people. I just realized that sometimes, you're also very naive." Zi Xiecheng couldn't help but laugh. Chu Yang said it very straightforwardly, but he said everyone's evaluation of good and bad people. Actually, everyone evaluated good and bad people in this way. Everyone returned to the Orchard Palace. Chu Luer obediently went to make tea, and Mo Qinggu also ran over to help. The 2 little Lolas bickered as they busied themselves, chattering away. Everyone who saw them understood and laughed. Chu Luer and Mo Qinggu walked out one after another, one holding a teapot, and the other holding a teacup. Instantly, the hall was filled with the fragrance of tea. Not long after, Bu Luqing and Yu Lingxue came together. Everyone gathered around a large round table and sat down. In order they were Zi Xiecheng, Bu Luqing, Yu Lingxue, Feng Yuro, Wu Qianqian, Chu Yang, Mo Qinggu, Dong Wushang, Rui Butong, Mo Lei and Chu Luer. There were exactly 11 people. Everyone had a cup of tea in front of them, and the fragrance of the tea wafted up. They didn't say a word, and were all waiting. Everyone didn't know why Zi Xiecheng had gathered everyone here. Only Bu Luqing had a faint feeling in his heart, and his expression was actually somewhat fervent. I've gathered everyone here today because of a sentence from Supreme Martial Artist Bu. Zi Xieching smiled lightly, and her eyes darted around the faces of Feng and Yu. With a wave of her hand, everyone instantly felt an invisible barrier isolating the entire Orchard Palace from this world. While this barrier was in place, no one in the entire heavenly layer would be able to sense or eavesdrop on what was going on inside. Not even the slightest bit of movement. Even the few experts standing at the peak of the heavens would definitely not be able to hear anything. Bu Luqing, Feng Yuro, and Yu Lingxue revealed looks of admiration at the same time. Just this simple move was something that the few of them would definitely not be able to do. Zi Xieching continued indifferently. Today at the auction house, Supreme Martial Artist Bu once asked me, what would it be like above the heavens? Once Zi Xieching said this, Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxue instantly straightened up. Everyone else also raised their heads and looked at Zi Xieching. What would it be like above the heavens? This was the unsolved mystery of the heavens continent. For 100,000 years, only the legendary two supreme martial artists, Chen Feng and Lu Yun, had transcended this world and gone to the bigger world. But this was only a legend after all. And after Chen Feng and Lu Yun left, they never came back. Therefore, no one had any evidence to prove whether the bigger world existed or not. Regarding this matter, everyone was actually uncertain. But today, they finally heard Zi Xieching talk about this matter. Everyone held their breaths, fearing that they would miss out on a single word. Bu Luqing did not even care that Mo Qinggu was snuggling in Chu Yang's arms now. He pricked up his ears and listened attentively, because he could feel the existence of the bigger world. Just half a step, and he would be able to cross it. Therefore, what Zi Xieching was going to say today was extremely important to him, and Ning Tianya. Chu Yang held Mo Qingwu's waist, and looked at Zi Xieching with bright eyes. Only he knew that what Zi Xieching was going to say now was really, for him. In this, it contained all of Zi Xieching's wishes and hopes. Everyone knows about the heavens. The heavens continent is the name of this continent. Zi Xieching's voice was very slow. Therefore, this continent has become the heavens in everyone's eyes. But is this the real heavens? If it is, then why are there only 3 heavens? Her voice was indifferent as she said, maybe some people will say that 100,000 years ago, that powerful person folded the heavens and caused it to collapse. Only 3 heavens were created. But, Brother Bu might know, how can a person at this level make such a low-level mistake? Bu Luqing sighed and nodded. He said somewhat bleakly, that's right. Usually, at our level, we would not do things that we are not completely sure of. But that person had the ability to fold a continent, but made a huge mistake. This is one of the things that we have been puzzling over for a long time. Zi Xieching said. Therefore, that person made a mistake by folding the heavens and folding it into 3 layers, leaving behind a sort of calamity to maintain the stability of this continent. All these don't make sense, Zi Xieching said slowly. Zi Xieching must have thought about these questions many times. Therefore, although she spoke slowly, her words were clear and organized. All these shouldn't have happened, but they did. It's definitely not because that powerful person's ability was limited, nor because he made a mistake. He had other motives. But this motive is worth thinking about. Zi Xieching's tone was very heavy when she spoke. She didn't look at Chu Yang. But Chu Yang immediately knew that Zi Xieching was reminding him of something important. This could be a conspiracy, or it could be a kind of expectation. There's also one, Zi Xieching said lightly, as the Sword of Calamity's master. Therefore, the Sword of Calamity's masters have all disappeared. Disappearing is definitely not the end, but they are not qualified. So they were eliminated. Zi Xieching's heavy words shocked everyone at the same time. They were not qualified. They were eliminated. To be continued. Chapter 1066. They didn't qualify and were eliminated. Everyone was shocked. The problem was that the they that Zi Xieching mentioned were the first 8 tribulation sword masters. They were also the legendary people who could decide the fate of the heavens. If they didn't qualify, who did? They didn't qualify because there must be one tribulation sword master who qualified. But this person hasn't appeared yet. Maybe it's the first tribulation sword master. Or maybe it's the 10th tribulation sword master. Zi Xiecheng said slowly. It's been tens of thousands of years since I came to this land. Back then, I was curious about this matter. After the tribulation sword master reorganized the heavens, I followed him secretly and went to the place where he nourished the heavens. At this point, everyone's expression turned solemn. What Zi Xiecheng was about to say was the top secret of the heavens. I followed that tribulation sword master and saw that he was troubled and tortured by something during that period of time. He was in so much pain that he wanted to commit suicide a few times. But he didn't die in the end. Zi Xiecheng said solemnly. I can see that he doesn't want to do that. He's very conflicted. He also has a conscience. He even wants to die, to use his own death to end everything. But unfortunately he can't even die. He was tortured like that for 2 years. Buluqing looked at Chu Yang. His gaze was complicated. During that period of time, this tribulation sword master cursed the same person tens of thousands of times. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. Who was he cursing? Buluqing asked. He was cursing the person who created the tribulation sword master. He is the one who created the catastrophe sword. Zi Xiecheng said indifferently. And not only that, he cursed once in those 2 years. It was too late for regrets. What did he regret? Chu Yang had a feeling in his heart, but he still asked. He's been repeating these words non-stop. Zi Xiecheng looked up at the ceiling and said word by word. He regretted the lake of despair. Sigh. 7 words, a sigh. Sigh. Chu Yang sighed silently and was in a daze. At this moment, no one knew that Chu Yang's heart was in turmoil. He felt a little lucky. He felt a little proud, a little satisfied and a little sad. Zi Xiecheng didn't know what these 7 words meant, but Chu Yang was someone who had experienced it himself. At this moment, he could completely understand what the tribulation sword master was regretting. The lake of despair was indeed the biggest test of the tribulation sword master. If he made a wrong step, then his fate would repeat the cycle of the previous 8 tribulation sword masters, falling into that vicious circle of eternal damnation. Presumably, the choice made by the Master of Calamity sword at that time was the complete opposite of his own. So the illusion, the reality, or, at that time, the illusory realm changed according to the heart. And the heart led to the end. He rejoiced and felt proud that he had survived the greatest test. In the future, his path would be different from that of the previous 8 masters of the Calamity sword. They were the tribulations as tribulations to SSS, the tribulations sword. SSS. Zi Xiecheng paused for a while. Chu Yang knew that she was giving him time to think on purpose. Finally, Zi Xiecheng continued. This tribulation sword master struggled with himself for 2 whole years. In the end, he still chose to send his brother into the heaven-repairing cave. Chu Yang sighed. Buluqing and the others also sighed. The tribulation's emotions moved heaven and earth. This was recognized by the heavens. But such a hero was sacrificed just like that. Where was the justice? Zi Xiecheng said lightly. But at that moment, I felt that his brother's soul was dissipating and not disappearing. It was as if he was breaking into pieces and slowly diverging to another unknown place. And that place was not the heavens beyond heaven. At this point everyone was shocked. So those tribulation sword masters didn't die? Chu Yang asked. No, they died. But in a different way they survive. Zi Xiecheng looked deeply at Chu Yang and said, that unknown place, in my opinion, should be the netherworld. The netherworld. Chu Yang sighed. The tribulation sword master's mission came to an end when the upper 3 heavens were unified. But this is also a huge dividing line. This is the key. Tribulations disappeared in this world, but they will still exist in another world. But the tribulation sword master really disappeared. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. Disappeared. I understand. Chu Yang took a deep breath. Zi Xiecheng meant that tribulations didn't really disappear completely, but the tribulation sword master would disappear completely. This was completely in line with Chu Yang's expectations. How could a completely heartless person receive good karma? Although this was a little idealistic, Chu Yang insisted that this was not in accordance with the laws of heaven. People's actions might have different standpoints, But people's hearts were divided into good and evil. Zi Xiecheng didn't go into details. She only said, "So, I reckon that the Tribulation Sword Master's mission is actually something that hasn't been successful all this time. But this failure can allow the person who folded the heavens to achieve another level of another purpose." Everyone nodded silently. "So, I reckon that the Tribulation Sword Master's mission definitely doesn't end here. Because the Tribulation Sword Master has completely disappeared." "This doesn't make sense," Zi Xiecheng said. "But how do you know that he has completely disappeared, and not the same as Tribulations?" Chu Yang asked. Baluching smiled. "Senior Zi, did you attach your divine senses?" Zi Xiecheng smiled. "Yes, I attached 10 divine senses, and they disappeared together with these 10 people. But after 10,000 years only one came back. As for the most important one, it had disappeared. Because of the disappearance of that divine sense, it caused another loss of my divine senses. So, I never came out after I recovered from my cultivation in the Black Blood Forest. It was only until 20,000 years ago that I recovered my divine senses." "I'm impressed." Baluching let out a long sigh. Only a peak-level expert like him would know how much danger and disbelief was contained in Zi Xiecheng's casual words. The disappearance of divine senses and the disappearance of divine senses were definitely two different concepts. Disappearance was equivalent to death, and the death of divine senses could result in death, disability, or mental retardation. Even Baluching himself couldn't avoid these two outcomes if his divine senses were to disappear. But Zi Xiecheng was able to cultivate and recover. "You shouldn't admire me, but the power that can completely eliminate my divine senses." Zi Xiecheng smiled. Baluching smiled. "Big sister, you were going to talk about the heavens beyond heavens," Chu Lua reminded her. "But you're talking about the Tribulation Sword Master now. I'm talking about the heavens beyond heavens." Zi Xiecheng smiled and pulled Chu Lua into her arms. She said, "I mentioned the Tribulation Sword Master because I think his real mission should be to rush out of the heavens beyond heavens, to go to a higher level place to complete some things, or to complete the final mission given by this powerful expert. And I won't send myself and my brothers to their deaths in the upper 3 heavens. Here, we're talking about the heavens beyond heavens," Zi Xiecheng said lightly, "which is the real Heavenly Imperial Court." The real Heavenly Imperial Court. Everyone's heart trembled violently. Chu Yang lowered his head and leaned his forehead against Mo Qing Wu's little head. He could feel the warmth of this little girl's body as he silently pondered in his heart. Beyond the heavens, there are countless worlds, countless continents. Every one of these continents is similar to the heavens beyond heavens continent. But above the heavens, which is the common above these small worlds, no one knows. There's the tightest heavenly perception there. Only when one's cultivation activates this heavenly perception will he be tested. This is what you usually call heavenly punishment. Zi Xiecheng smiled lightly. Heavenly punishment is actually a test. If you pass the test of heavenly punishment, you'll be qualified to enter that mysterious world. Have you entered that world before? Baluching asked anxiously. Yes, I have. Zi Xiecheng nodded faintly. However, I only stayed for a short period of time before I came out. Less than 1,000 years. How's it like inside? Baluching asked. Inside? Zi Xiecheng smiled lightly. It's vast and boundless, full of spiritual energy and full of experts. Brother Bu, you'll know when you get there. What can be called the heavens beyond heavens? With your cultivation, how's it like inside? Baluching asked, still unwilling to give up. It's like traveling. Even going down, Zi Xiecheng said reservedly. Of course, I'm not sure about the specific situation. I went there just to find someone. Since I couldn't find him, I left early. I didn't come into contact with the experts of the extreme Tao in there. I didn't even come into contact with the people of the heavens beyond heaven's imperial court. Go. Baluching took a breath, his eyes shining brightly. The messenger in charge of the heavens beyond heaven's continent is from the heavens beyond heaven's imperial court. Zi Xiecheng smiled and said meaningfully, Brother Bu, that place is more dangerous than here. But there are also more opportunities. That's where the real experts of the extreme Tao grow. Bu Liuqing's eyes shone even brighter. Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro looked at each other and saw each other's sparkling eyes. The real heavens beyond heaven's imperial court. Chu Yang repeated silently. Leaning on Mo Qingwu's soft hair, he thought. Life is just like autumn. Since there's such a place, as long as there's a chance, I'll definitely bring my brothers to the heavens beyond heavens. Let my Qingwu dance in the real heavens beyond heaven's imperial court. One dance moves the heavens. To be continued. Chapter 1067. Dong Wuxiang's muscular body sat upright like a mountain. His expression was solemn, but the tip of his brows and the corner of his eyes were filled with saber intent. There's such a place. I must go up and take a look. I must. Rui Butong raised his head, but he was thinking in his heart. If the brothers can go up, I'll go up and take a look too. But if the brothers don't go up, I won't go up either. No matter how good the place is, if I'm the only one there, what's the point? Zi Xiecheng quietly observed the changes in everyone's expressions. She said slowly, the reason why I've gathered everyone here today is because everyone here has the potential to go there, including these two little girls. Qingwu Lure. At this point, Zi Xiecheng finally turned to look at Chu Yang. The look in her eyes was extremely complicated. Hearing Zi Xiecheng's words, Bu Liuqing and the Moon Breeze couple were a little surprised. There were 11 people here. Other than Zi Xiecheng, there were 10 more. The three of them had no problem. Chu Yang should be able to do it. Qingwu should be able to do it. Qianqian had the potential. And this Dong Wuxiang with saber intent, and his wife also had the ability. But that ordinary Rui Butong, and Rui Butong who had an innate constitution, but was unable to cultivate due to his chronic illness, how could they have such potential? Zi Xiecheng looked at everyone present and smiled lightly. She said, however, having potential doesn't mean that you have the ability, and it doesn't mean that you can definitely go there. There are plenty of people with potential who fall in the process. There are even people with enough potential to rush to the supreme position of the strongest in the world. But they will be killed by a weak person when they are still very weak. So, the next step will depend on luck. She looked at everyone present and said softly, everyone, I have to remind you, luck is one's ability, and also the most important thing in one's ability. Luck can allow you to meet the right person, have a suitable goal, and then fight hard to reach the peak that you should reach. Luck can also allow you to have the potential to be number one in the world. But you don't need to participate in the battle between the strongest in the world when you start out. You don't even need to know what's going on. Just the strong wind alone can turn you into dust. This is luck. If you're unlucky, the prodigy will also die. With good luck, even mediocre people can rise to prominence. Zi Xiecheng said plainly. Everyone was thinking carefully. Luck. This was an illusory thing. How could one grasp it? At this point, Zi Xiecheng's words were somewhat abstruse. Luck, we mortals only think that it is a gift from the heavens. All sorts of coincidences are either luck, misfortune or good luck. Zi Xiecheng said softly. Actually, it's not luck. To ordinary people, it was just a coincidence, but to those with great abilities, it was something they could control. To control the luck of others. Controlling luck? Bu Liuqing was flabbergasted. Zi Xiecheng said lightly, there's nothing strange about it. Even if you haven't heard that luck can be controlled, you should have at least heard of the dragon vein, the fate of nations, and the fate of heaven and earth. Isn't there a saying about the luck of the clan? Everyone nodded. That's right. Such a saying was very common and familiar. Right now, the Tianji city they were in, the Zhuge clan, was a place where they could borrow the power of a mysterious force to probe the mysteries of the heavens. He was someone who could change fate. Furthermore, this was the most mysterious and unfathomable knowledge. Fate. It's a kind of luck. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. The so-called unfathomable mysteries of the heavens are actually the veins of fate. In this way, you should more or less understand it. Everyone nodded in realization. Previously, they really didn't think about fate and luck together. They always felt that fate was great, but luck was only a person's. But after hearing Zi Xiecheng's words, they felt that it made sense. After Zi Xiecheng finished speaking, everyone started to ponder silently. The world over there is very exciting. Zi Xiecheng looked out of the window. Outside the window, the north wind was blowing. It was already afternoon, and the north wind was getting more and more shrill. The sky was also getting darker and darker. That world is very exciting. Haha, Bu Luqing said faintly. But luck requires you to find a suitable person, a suitable target, and to fight for it. Only then can you achieve this goal. Miss Z, do you mean this suitable person is this generation's catastrophe sword master? There was a hint of mockery in Bu Luqing's voice. Zi Xiecheng frowned slightly, and was somewhat displeased. She said lightly, Brother Bu and the Moon Breeze couple have already transcended this step. They don't need the Calamity Sword Master to fight for it. But then again, if Brother Bu insists on thinking that this is what I mean, Zi Xiecheng said lightly, then this is what I mean. Bu Luqing said awkwardly, I'm just asking casually. I don't mean anything else. Zi Xiecheng said coldly, I don't mean anything else either. She sat quietly, and an invisible majestic aura was emitted from her. Bu Luqing sat on his seat, feeling as if he was sitting on pins and needles. His face gradually turned red, and he finally smiled bitterly and said, Miss Z, I'm just joking. And you know what I'm upset about? Haha. The Moon Breeze couple was surprised. They thought to themselves, this is strange. With Bu Luqing's unyielding temper, he actually gave in so easily? This is really strange. What they didn't know was that Bu Luqing had his own pettiness. His words weren't meant to question Zi Xiecheng, and definitely not to target Chu Yang. It was because Mo Qinggu was in love with Chu Yang that he was upset about. It was like a girl that he had painstakingly raised was about to become someone else's. That kind of feeling. It was purely to vent, but it caused Zi Xiecheng to misunderstand. How could Bu Luqing not feel awkward? How could Zi Xiecheng not know what Bu Luqing meant? She also knew that Bu Luqing didn't mean any harm when he said this. It was just a moment of discomfort in his heart. But the problem was, Zi Xiecheng herself wasn't very comfortable with this problem. So Bu Luqing's question hit the nail on the head. Zi Xiecheng immediately used this as a pretext to make a fuss. This made the supreme martial artist Bu so anxious that his face turned red, and his sweat fell like rain. Chu Yang, who was at the side, looked up. Looking at this, looking at that, he knew that if he opened his mouth now, both sides would point their spears at him. So he wisely lowered his head, and didn't say a word. Do whatever you want. Seeing how awkward Bu Luqing was now, Zi Xiecheng couldn't bear it. She sighed and said, Forget it, when I talk about this my thoughts aren't very smooth. So I'm a little impatient. Bu Luqing smiled and said, It's okay. It's okay. Zi Xiecheng nodded and said, Everyone, what you have to take note of is that if you intend to rush up, then from now on, what you should train and improve the most is not your cultivation, but your spirit and willpower. Everyone who has just gone up will encounter countless risks. Therefore, the requirements for one's spirit and willpower are especially important. Everyone nodded silently and remembered it well. If I want to leave this time, I will most likely go to that place. It is highly likely that he will go there, Zi Xiecheng said plainly. Chu Yang was shocked and said, Don't you want to go and look for it? Zi Xiecheng's eyes revealed a tinge of nostalgia. She said sadly, That is an obsession. Chu Yang nodded. That was an obsession. But it was also just an obsession. Nothing more. But it's also possible that I won't go there. Zi Xiecheng's pretty face turned cold. She gritted her teeth and said. Chu Yang kept quiet out of fear. He hurriedly shut his mouth. Moon Breeze. Zi Xiecheng looked at Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro seriously. Yes. The two hurriedly answered. You can look for Chu Yang for your problems. When his medical skills improve, he will be able to solve this problem for you. Zi Xiecheng lifted her chin toward Chu Yang. Really? Feng Yuro was overjoyed. Yu Lingxue's face was also full of excitement. Chu Yang definitely did not expect Zi Xiecheng to sell him out without batting an eyelid. Didn't they agree that he would not be able to handle this matter here? There was a way after the tribulation space was upgraded. But once Moon Breeze and Moon Breeze heard about it, wouldn't they kill him? Big Sister Z this. Chu Yang's face was bitter. He muttered fearlessly. Shut up. Zi Xiecheng's face was cold. This matter must be settled by you. You can't do it now. Can't you do it when your medical skills have improved? Why are you so unconfident? Chu Yang grimaced as if he had a toothache. Hissing and sucking in cold air, he nodded with a head full of cold sweat. Oh, okay. That's all for today. I can't go into too much detail about the rest. Zi Xiecheng chuckled. Moon Breeze and Bu Luqing both laughed. She couldn't go into too much detail. This was too interesting, because if she went into too much detail, there wouldn't be any surprises or accidents after she went up. And it would inevitably be greatly reduced. People of the martial world still liked excitement. Also, there's one more thing I need to ask of all of you, Zi Xiecheng said in a low voice. I'm afraid I'll be leaving soon. By then, Chu Yang and the rest. I need the three of you to take care of them. The Moon Breeze couple and Bu Luqing agreed readily. Of course, Feng Yuro thought. My disciple is dead set on him. I can't not take care of her. Bu Luqing thought. My disciple is dead set on him. I can't not take care of her. At this moment, the two of them were actually saying the same thing. Almost at the same time, the second grandmasters of the big clans also gathered in one place. This place was the most secret underground chamber of the Zhuge clan. In order to prevent Zi Xiecheng's powerful divine senses from prying, the Zhuge clan had no choice but to reveal this most secret place for discussion. Yi Di Xiaosei, Lan Muxue, Zhuge Hutu and the rest all sat with heavy expressions. They didn't say a word. A black shadow flashed, and the Dharma Supreme walked in alone with a heavy expression. Immediately, the dozens of supreme martial artists outside released their divine senses at the same time, forming a huge protective shield to prevent eavesdropping. Inside, 10 high-level supreme martial artists also released their divine senses at the same time, forming a protective shield. This small space was tightly sealed. Chapter 1068. The Dharma Supreme sat down, his gaze sweeping across the faces of everyone present. He said indifferently, What are your thoughts on today's matter? Yi Di sighed with a bitter smile. It's far more serious than we imagined. All the second grandmasters sighed together. Yi Di pondered for a moment before he said, Lord Dharma Supreme, I'll be bold to ask you a question. The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, Go ahead. Is this Chu Yang the master of the Calamity Sword? Yi Di's expression was solemn as he asked the question word by word. This question had been lingering in Yi Di's heart for a long time. He had also asked the Dharma Supreme once before. However, the Dharma Supreme did not answer directly at that time. He only said that he would wait and see. Today, at this gathering, Yi Di brought up this question again. However, his state of mind was already very different from back then. At that time, Chu Yang was just a negligible hidden danger. However, now he had become an opponent that could compete with the big clans. Although this was nothing in itself, and was not qualified to have anything. However, the strength of the backer behind him was shocking. When the other 8 second grandmasters heard this, they could not help but perk up their ears. This matter was really too important. If Chu Yang was the master of the Calamity Sword, then the big clans were really in danger. They had to think of a way to get rid of him as soon as possible. The Dharma Supreme was silent for a moment before he said, I don't think so. Or maybe I didn't find out. All the second grandmasters' hearts were beating like drums. The Dharma Supreme's words were remarkable. Was it true or not? The Dharma Supreme's eyes fell on Li Xiangxi's face. He said indifferently, Xiangxi, what do you think? Li Xiangxi laughed bitterly and said, I don't have much contact with this person. However, cough cough, the Li clan is in a very awkward position now. It's hard to say anything. All the second patriarchs snorted in unison. Of course you wouldn't panic now that you had one of the tribulations in your clan. However, you said such meaningless words. Xiangxi, is that Li Xiongtu in your clan confirmed to be one of the tribulations? The Dharma Supreme asked with a smile. I'm really not sure about that. Li Xiangxi shook his head and smiled bitterly. Lord Dharma Supreme, I'm just going to speak the truth here. If we really believed that he was one of the tribulations, the Li clan would not have come to the medicine banquet this time. But if he were to deny it, there was nothing he could do. This matter is currently a mess. Shi Jing from the Shi family said in annoyance. You dumb chicken. In my opinion, no one here is more clear-headed than you. You're just trying to take advantage of me. The Dharma Supreme smiled. I do believe in the words yearning. However, in my opinion, that might not be the one in your family. He said indifferently. For generations, before Calamity Sword Master's wings were fully grown, Calamity would not show himself. Hidden in the mortal world, it was impossible to distinguish between them. For 10,000 years, I don't know how many people have been wrongly killed, but in the real tribulation, no one has died. As for your family's Li Xiong too, he had already spread this sort of rumor long ago. Furthermore, he did it in public. The Dharma Supreme said indifferently. Do you think that with so many of us here, we really can't kill Li Xiong too? Even if the Li clan protects him with all its might, what can you do? Li Xiangxi was sweating profusely. You're right, Lord Dharma Supreme. However, he was thinking in his heart. Even I can't tell if that person in my family is one of the tribulations. Can you really deduce it just by speculating? The Dharma Supreme stared at him for a while and finally said, Xiangxi, you can leave first. The Li clan should not participate in the discussion this time. Li Xiangxi looked at him in shock. The 8 second grandmasters looked at him fiercely. This sentence of the Dharma Supreme was tantamount to saying that Li Xiangxi did not believe the Dharma Supreme's words at all. In other words, although Li Xiangxi was sitting here now, he could actually be considered as a traitor. Lord Dharma Supreme, are we going to let him leave so easily? Xiao Sei's face was filled with murderous intent. Why don't we just kill him here? What if he goes out and reveals our secret? What should we do then? That's right, Lord Dharma Supreme. This time, the Li clan has already made it clear that they are on the side of the Tribulation Sword Master. Sooner or later, they will become a huge threat. This time, we will get rid of Li Xiangxi and also remove a huge threat for the future. Lan Muxia said through gritted teeth. The other second grandmasters all agreed. Li Xiangxi's face was ashen. If they were to really fight, there would be no chance of him escaping alive. Only death awaited him. The crowd was in an uproar. The Dharma Supreme looked at Li Xiangxi and pondered for a long time. Then he said, Xiangxi, leave. Remember what I said today. One day, you will realize. Some things will always be beyond your expectations. There will always be misunderstandings in many things. And some things will always be regretted. He waved his hand indifferently and said, Go. I will give you a chance to regret in the future. Lord Dharma Supreme. Everyone exclaimed in unison. The Dharma Supreme's expression did not change. He only waved his hand again. Thank you, Lord Dharma Supreme. Xiangxi will never forget Lord Dharma Supreme's kindness today. Li Xiangxi cupped his fists and said emotionally, No need to stand on ceremony. Just remember my words. The Dharma Supreme said solemnly, If you leave now, there is no need for you to participate in the medicine banquet. Go back to the Li clan directly. If you continue to stay here, I am afraid you will be killed. Li Xiangxi trembled and said, Yes. He stood up and walked out in big strides. When he reached the door, he hesitated. The Dharma Supreme looked at his back view with a frown. But Li Xiangxi only hesitated for a moment before he really opened the door and walked out. Between the current interests of a big clan and the future prosperity of his descendants, he obviously chose the latter. The Dharma Supreme sighed softly. Lord Dharma Supreme, should we send someone to kill him? Xiao Sei asked. Once Li Xiangxi leaves, he will become an irreconcilable enemy of ours. It will be completely different from the small fights we had previously. The Dharma Supreme shook his head indifferently. No need. He was silent for a moment before he said, The Li clan is not worthy of such attention. If he is not one of the tribulations, the Li clan will naturally still lean towards us in the future. If he is really one of the tribulations, we can also take this opportunity to grab hold of this clue and lure out the real tribulation's sword master. Therefore, Li Xiangxi cannot be killed. Everyone was enlightened. However, the tribulation sword master is a long-term concern, while Chu Yang is a short-term concern. The Dharma Supreme tapped the table lightly with his finger. Everyone, don't underestimate this Chu Yang. The huge power that he can bring is now something that even the law enforcement officers have to take seriously. Yes, Yi Di said solemnly. This Chu Yang is indeed a huge concern at the moment. His backing is too strong, too strong. Therefore, we have to get rid of him. The Dharma Supreme sighed softly. He said, I remember that thousands of years ago, I once told all of you that every clan must nurture a secret force. This force must not be known to anyone. Now it is time for this force to be put to use. Xiaosei nodded heavily. Lord Dharma Supreme, you mean assassination? Assassination of Chu Yang? The Dharma Supreme shook his head lightly. No. The power of this young junior, Chu Yang, mainly comes from that mysterious woman. Therefore, killing Chu Yang alone will not help at all. It will even invite the crazy revenge of a peerless expert. Now that the Tribulation Sword Master is about to be born, we cannot afford such a loss. Therefore, if we want to kill, the first one to be killed is that mysterious and powerful woman. The Dharma Supreme tapped the table lightly with his finger and took away one of the teacups in front of him. If we want to do this, we need all of us here to take action together. In addition, we need to add the secret force, the combined power of hundreds of supreme martial artists, and invite Lord Wu to come out and do all we can to encircle and annihilate them, even at the cost of sacrifice. The Dharma Supreme's words were very heavy. Every word was like a huge hammer that hammered into the depths of everyone's hearts. Moreover, we need to create an environment where we have no choice but to fight to the death. Only then can we succeed. A hint of bloodlust flashed in the Dharma Supreme's eyes. Zhuge Hutu, your family's great nebula divide of heavenly secrets array will be put to use here. Zhuge Hutu trembled and said, Yes, I will listen to the Dharma Supreme's instructions. The great nebula divide of heavenly secrets array draws on the power of the heavenly way, the power of the stars, the power of the earth, the veins of the mountains and rivers, the spirits of the people and the souls of the supreme martial artists. It is enough to kill experts who are 3 times more powerful than the array. If this great nebula divide of heavenly secrets array of heavenly secrets has 108 supreme martial artists taking part in it, then in this world, who can surpass the combined power of all 108 people, including you and me, by more than 4 times? The Dharma Supreme said indifferently. Therefore, the basic plan is set here. With 108 supreme martial artists taking charge of the eye of the array, and a total of 300 supreme martial artists maintaining it, Lord Wu Jiueching will provide support and protect the array with poison. This way, the power of the array can be doubled. It is equivalent to thousands of supreme martial artists attacking at the same time. Even if Buluqing and Ning Tianya come at the same time, they will also die here. There is absolutely no chance of luck. Everyone listened with heavy hearts, but they couldn't help but heave a long sigh of relief. If that was the case, no matter how powerful that woman was, she would definitely die. Even if she was a deity, she would definitely not be able to escape from such an array. The Dharma Supreme was really generous. Once he made a move, it was already such a huge and powerful commotion. It's just that, how can we lure that woman into the array? Zhuge Hutu asked with a frown. Currently they are with the Moon Breeze couple. If the Moon Breeze couple is in danger, she will definitely come to their rescue. The Dharma Supreme's eyes flashed. And the Moon Breeze couple will definitely be in danger. When the array is fully set up, I will invite the Moon Breeze couple for a talk in my name. With the temperament and character of the Moon Breeze couple, I have full confidence that they will come. Everyone perked up. Brilliant plan. The Dharma Supreme's long hair swayed, even though there was no wind. He said indifferently, How long has it been since I have schemed against someone like this? This woman, even if she dies, is worthy of being proud. He had finally been overtaken. Fuck. Just now he saw a chat group of authors. One of the authors joked that Feng Ling had really created a new record. Basically, all the great gods had smashed him one by one. Haha sigh, his heart ached. 7 days, 3 nights, crazy updates of close to 120,000 words, and he couldn't even maintain a first place. We are not far behind now. Everyone, let's work harder and charge ahead. Man fights for pride, Buddha fights for incense. I have been fighting and losing all the way till now. I have long been unyielding. I will not admit defeat. I still want to fight. Even if we lose twice, we still have 24 days. We will fight till the end. Chapter 1069. The two supreme martial artists gathered together. Zhuge Hutu took out the diagram of the Great Nebula Divide of Heavenly Secrets Array and explained it in detail. Zhuge Hutu did not want to reveal his clan's greatest trump card. However, if Zi Xiecheng was not eliminated, the big clans would feel like there was a steel knife hanging over their necks. They could neither advance nor retreat. Just like in today's auction, Zi Xiecheng alone suppressed everyone on his side. Everyone had no choice but to give her money despite their grievances. Why? If she was unhappy, she could wipe you out. And it was to wipe out your entire clan, not just one person, who dared to disobey. If they disobeyed, they would cough. If they coughed, it meant that they were unhappy. If they continued to be unhappy, they would kill. This grievance almost caused everyone to have a brain hemorrhage, smiling and throwing in more than double the amount to buy a bunch of medicine. And these people were all high and mighty people, who had been at the top for thousands of years. Who could tolerate this? Not to mention, besides Zi Xiecheng, there was also Buluqing on Chu Yang's side. Now, Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro were also on Chu Yang's side. Such strong power made the whole world look askance. Not to mention Yu Lingxue's brother, Wu Qianqian, Buluqing's brother, Heavenly Yin Body and Innate Spirit Meridians. Zi Xiecheng's brother, Innate Body. These were three demon-like characters in the future. As long as there was space for them to grow up, they would definitely replace Buluqing, Feng Yu and Zi Xiecheng as the other three overlords of the world. Top figures. When that time came, with the addition of the new and old, the big clans would not be able to catch up even if they ate shit. Once Chu Yang's power rose, it would be unstoppable. Therefore, even if Zhuge Hutu was unwilling, he could only do so. The Dharma Supreme stood with his hands behind his back, looking at Zhuge Hutu and explaining. He said lightly, "For now, kill that woman first, then kill Buluqing and Feng Yu. Lastly, we'll deal with Chu Yang and those little girls." He slightly lowered his head, and his long hair nearly covered his eyes. Only 2 rays of chilling light penetrated through the seams of his hair. He casually clenched his fist, and a thin staff formed from qi appeared in his hand. He pointed at the formation map and said indifferently, "Yi Clan, guard here. The lowest 50 supreme martial artists. Yi, any problem?" The Night Emperor suddenly gritted his teeth and said, "No problem." The Dharma Supreme pointed his thin rod in another direction and said, "This place is the gate of life and death." He needed a sharp sense of death. Xiao Sei, can your Xiao clan take responsibility? Xiao Sei calculated for a while and said, "Including the hidden forces of the Xiao clan, we can mobilize 40 supreme martial artists and myself. Then, I feel that if we want to prevent that woman from breaking out of the encirclement and breaking through life and death, this force is not enough." The Dharma Supreme pondered for a moment. He knew that what Xiao Sei said was the truth. If Zi Xiecheng only wanted to escape when she was seriously injured, with her strength, she could totally kill Xiao Sei and the others and escape far away. Then, there would be no end of trouble in the future. Thus he said, "Since that's the case, I'll send you another 20 supreme martial artists from the law enforcement headquarters." Xiao Sei was overjoyed and said, "If that's the case, I dare to guarantee with my head that nothing will go wrong." The Dharma Supreme nodded. He pointed at a few other places and made arrangements. When he reached the first place, he was silent for a moment before he said, "There are 50 supreme martial artists from the law enforcement headquarters guarding this place." Everyone nodded solemnly, cursing the Li clan in their hearts. If the Li clan did not betray them, then with the combined strength of all these supreme martial artists and the great constellation array, they could totally recreate the power of the tribulation. In fact, it would be several times stronger. Once the Li clan left, this good thing would be gone. Bastard. None. Pop-up window square. Warning. Finally, the Dharma Supreme looked at the position of the eye of the array in the center. After thinking for a long time, he said, "I will do my best to get Lord Wu to guard this place personally. together with the 20 elders and 8 high priests of the law enforcement headquarters. Success in one battle. I will personally patrol the periphery. The Dharma Supreme stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, in this battle, other than the forces of the various clans guarding their homes, all the elites of Chongtian will be mobilized, just to kill 4 people. The 8 second patriarchs instantly felt their blood boil. They instinctively felt their blood boiling, and even their hair was about to stand on end. Bu Luqing, Feng and you and I are at most peak experts of the heavenly layer. The Dharma Supreme smiled indifferently and said, but that woman is a true expert of the extreme Tao. Therefore, the name of this battle shall be Slaying of the Tao. Slaying of the Tao, Yi Di murmured and repeated, only feeling his blood boiling. This battle directly concerns the future of the Chongtian clans and law enforcement officers. Everyone, a battle of life and death cannot be taken lightly. Sacrifices are inevitable. Everyone must be fully mentally prepared. The Dharma Supreme had basically finished his arrangements for this battle. All the supreme martial artists started to calculate the forces that they could mobilize. The sooner this matter is settled, the better. The more secretive, the better. The Dharma Supreme said solemnly, we must complete all the arrangements before the medicine banquet starts. During this period of time, do whatever you need to do, and do not alert the enemy. Yes, everyone agreed. The semi-finals of the medicine banquet will be in 2 days. The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath and said, as the pharmacist of the Southeast law enforcement officers, Chu Yang has already entered the semi-finals and cannot be replaced. Moreover, I heard that Chu Yang's medical skills are superb, and he has inherited the soul of the ancient medical saint. He is not to be underestimated. The most important thing is that we cannot touch him. Once we do, we will alert the enemy. Yi Di pondered and said, what does the Dharma Supreme mean? Chu Yang is very likely to enter the finals. We have already announced the date of the finals to the world, and the bunch of stubborn old men from the Medicine Valley will host it, so it cannot be changed. Before the finals, our men will need to rush over from all over the continent, obviously in a hurry. Therefore, we must deal with these people after the finals. Therefore, the champion's heaven-nourishing jade is very likely to fall into Chu Yang's hands. The Dharma Supreme said solemnly, and the heaven-nourishing jade has the ability to bring the dead back to life and gather souls. Once he gets the heaven-nourishing jade, even if that woman is dead, there is still a certain possibility that he can use the opportunity of nourishing the heavens to revive her. Although such a chance is very slim, and Chu Yang may not live until then, it is still a possibility that we must guard against. Therefore, Chu Yang cannot become the champion. He cannot get the heaven-nourishing jade. The following few sentences were not spoken by the Dharma Supreme, but were added by the crowd one after another. After they finished speaking, everyone realized that their expressions had become even more solemn. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. How could there be such a thing? The Medicine Valley is not under our control. The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly and pointed out the most crucial point. Without the Medicine Valley, the heaven-nourishing jade cannot be refined either. Therefore, it is best for your pharmacists to ensure that nothing goes wrong and eliminate Chu Yang. The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, put an end to this. There must not be any mistake that could lead to a comeback. Shijing pondered and frowned. If it is the top pharmacist of each clan, there is a high possibility that Chu Yang will be eliminated. However, our men have also passed the preliminary round and entered the semi-finals, so it cannot be changed either. Moreover, pharmacists who have already participated in the medicine banquet once cannot participate again, because their luck has already dissipated. The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, isn't this easy? Yi Di frowned slightly and said, what does the Dharma Supreme mean? The Dharma Supreme walked out and said, we still can't strip Chu Yang's face, but the face of your own pharmacists can be stripped off. Moreover, once you use the soul transfer magic, won't you be able to multiply your energy? Why should you be afraid of luck? He smiled lightly and walked out, leaving behind a sentence. Don't tell me that you don't even know how to use the soul transfer magic. The Dharma Supreme disappeared. The 8 of them looked at each other, and stood there in a daze. This method, of course, could work. There was no problem for a veteran pharmacist with experience in the medicine banquet to suppress a newbie like Chu Yang. Moreover, even if one of them couldn't suppress him, how could all of them be inferior to him? Even if they made 8 mistakes, there was still one left. However, as long as Chu Yang made one mistake, it would be over. The chances of winning were above 10%. It could be said that it was foolproof. However, the problem was that in this way, each clan would lose 2 of their most outstanding pharmacists. Skin from a living person, made into a human skin mask, and used the supreme martial artist's cultivation to create it. It could change the appearance in a short period of time. At least, it could maintain its vitality for half a year. Half a year later, when the human skin mask lost its effectiveness and started to wrinkle, the matter would basically be over. Using the soul transfer magic to transfer a portion of the energy of the skin pharmacist's soul to another person's body, this person would be able to possess everything of this person for a short period of time, including skills. However, it was still only for a short period of time. The apothecary whose soul was transferred would definitely die. However, the apothecary who received the soul transfer would also die in half a year's time, vanishing from this world. In this way, it would be equivalent to the 2 top pharmacists of the younger generation, and the older generation dying an unnatural death. However, while it was easy to destroy, how could it be so easy to nurture a pharmacist? It might not even be possible to have a talented pharmacist in decades or centuries. The contribution of an outstanding pharmacist to a clan was self-evident. This included treating illnesses, prescribing medicines, piercing meridians, increasing cultivation. The role of a pharmacist in the rise of a clan was indispensable. Sacrificing them just like that? Just to prevent Chu Yang from being first? Was it worth it? All the second grandmasters looked at each other. For a moment, none of them could make up their minds. Why do I feel that the Dharma Supreme values this Chu Yang even more than that woman? Ling Fengyan frowned, somewhat puzzled. No, it's the Dharma Supreme values the heaven-nourishing jade, Xiaosei added after some thought. What do we do now? Everyone's gaze was on Yi Di. Yi Di's face was covered in a dense fog again. He said softly, "If we go through so much trouble and sacrifice so many lives to kill that woman, but Chu Yang uses the heaven-nourishing jade to revive her, will our clan still exist? Since we can sacrifice so many supreme martial artists' lives, what's the point of 2 mere pharmacists?" Chapter 1070. The sword spirit's illusory figure floated and seeped into Chu Luer's body like a wisp of mist. Zi Xiecheng pressed one hand on Chu Luer's head and the other hand on the purple crystal vat, continuously injecting Yin energy into it. The purple crystal vat was originally Yin energy, and the mysterious Yin bone-destroying water in it was the world's #1 cold poison. As for the cold Yin energy that Zi Xiecheng injected again, in terms of its cold nature, it was even colder than the mysterious Yin bone-destroying water. Chu Luer's body was soaked in the mysterious Yin bone-destroying water, and had already fainted. Slowly, her body became somewhat transparent in the water. The water surface rippled, and the sword spirit gave a message. Then Zi Xiecheng said lightly, "Medicine." Chu Yang took out this special incomplete heavy pill, and put it into Chu Luer's mouth. Once the heavy pill entered her mouth, it immediately turned into a rainbow-like color, and exploded in Chu Luer's mouth. Various colored mists disappeared into Chu Luer's meridians. This was an incomplete version of the heavy pill. Although it was called incomplete because it lacked the materials of the rare herbs, in reality, it contained a lot of materials. The materials were so precious that it was almost the most precious since ancient times. Purple gas appeared on Zi Xiecheng's face. She exhaled lightly and spat out a gust of purple gas from her mouth. Then, Chu Luer's body was also enveloped by purple gas in the next moment. Chu Yang could clearly see that on Chu Luer's forehead, little by little black things slowly appeared. The color changed from light to dark, and slowly, they actually bulged out of the skin and dripped down like ink. Zi Xiecheng grabbed this black thing in her hand and threw it out. Then, she shouted softly, "Sword Spirit, you must protect the consciousness space." Suddenly, A gust of purple light shot out from her eyes. Then, a strong purple gas enveloped the entire purple crystal vat. Streams of colorful things emerged from Chu Luer's body. But under this purple gas, they could not disperse. They obediently gathered into a stream, and returned to Chu Luer's mouth and nose. She breathed them in. This is the innate poison of the mother's fetus. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. This poison has the same name in all the planes. It is the poison of heaven and earth. This is the true source of all poisons in the world. Therefore, in the eyes of a quack, Luer's illness is nothing special. No matter what, there was no way to cure it. But in the eyes of the Almighty, it was an earth-shattering opportunity. With the main body of the poison of heaven and earth as a foundation, the human-faced rainbow spider's poison core, and the poisonous flood dragon's poison core. There's also the heavenly poison jade core, black blood poisonous core vine, and other deadly poisons in the world, as well as countless treasures. After Chu Luer recovers this time, she'll have the heavenly poison body, an innate constitution. Zi Xiecheng seemed to be talking to herself. In one breath he said, furthermore, with the purple qi of heaven and earth that I have painstakingly cultivated to circulate throughout my body, condensing my meridians and expanding my dantian, all the meridians in my body are opened. From now on, I will not encounter any bottleneck until I collapse the sky and shatter the void. The sword spirit protecting her space of consciousness is also a great fortune. Such a situation is hard to come by even in 10,000 years. I don't belong to this world. Therefore, I am a guest from another world. Similarly, the sword spirit does not belong to this world. He is a Yin spirit. Therefore, our cooperation is the cooperation of heaven and earth. It is called reincarnation. After reincarnation, I will directly raise Chu Luer's cultivation to the third stage of martial saint. In the future, the training of her skills and training will be yours. Zi Xiecheng opened her eyes and looked at Chu Yang. Do you understand? Chu Yang suppressed the excitement in his heart. I completely understand. It's just that the sword spirit once said that Luer needs to take 3 of such heavy pills consecutively. Is it? There's no need. Zi Xiecheng said decisively. Without my help, of course, she needs 3 pills. But now, with my help, she has completely recovered. As she spoke, an illusory shadow floated out from the unconscious Chu Luer. The sword spirit, who looked exhausted, entered Chu Yang's tribulation space without any hesitation. He only left behind 2 words. Crazy. Zi Xiecheng smiled. Chu Yang asked, what's wrong? Zi Xiecheng snorted and said, the method that I said caused this fellow to exhaust too much of his energy. He didn't know at first, but when I used the purple gas, he could only follow my method. Now this fellow seems to have gone back to recuperate. The sword spirit muttered in the tribulation space. What do you mean by exhausting too much of my energy? This evil woman almost drained all my energy. Even if it's the heavenly imperial court, this is definitely a waste. This crazy person actually used reincarnation in this heavenly imperial court. If I don't call her crazy, I'll really be letting her down. Chu Yang's heart shook. He knew that Zi Xiecheng was trying her best to create a team for Chu Yang, because she was about to leave. He couldn't help but feel touched. After a long time, Zi Xiecheng removed her hand from Luer's head and fished Chu Luer out of the mysterious Yin bone-destroying water. She used her energy to evaporate the water droplets on Chu Luer's body. Then, she placed her on the bed and wrapped the blanket tightly around her. She heaved a sigh of relief and said, it's okay now. She needs to sleep for 2 days. After 2 days, when she wakes up, she'll be a little girl who has reached the top in 1 step. Chu Yang was finally relieved and kept the purple crystal vat. But when he reached out his hand, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. The mysterious Yin bone-destroying water in the vat had actually become warm. It was like the lake water that had been exposed to the summer sun for a whole day. The temperature was actually not low. Under reincarnation, the cold poison of the mysterious Yin bone-destroying water has already become the energy of Luer's body. This is just some ordinary water. Zi Xiecheng smiled and said, if you don't mind that this is your sister's bathwater, you can use this water to make a cup of tea. It tastes pretty good too. Chu Yang gritted his teeth and nodded. Okay, I've made some tea for you to drink first. During the meal, Mo Qinggu was still sitting beside Chu Yang. After waiting for a long time and not seeing Chu Luer, she was actually very disappointed. She said, "Where's that chilly-like little girl?" Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This girl was only 1 year older than Chu Luer. But she actually started to call her little girl shamelessly. Zi Xiecheng smiled and said, "She's cultivating. When she comes out of seclusion, she'll look for you to fight." Mo Qingwu's little head was raised high, her chin facing the sky. She said disdainfully, just her." Zi Xiecheng smiled and didn't say anything. Chu Yang glanced at her and thought to himself, "I don't know what this elder sister is thinking. Why did Luer's cultivation suddenly improve so much that it's actually higher than Qingwu's now? And now she's even urging the two of them to fight. This doesn't seem right either." Chu Yang was about to dissuade her when he heard Buluqing say happily, "It's good to have a fight. My disciple can't lose no matter what." Supreme martial artist Bu was very optimistic. Chu Luer still couldn't cultivate yesterday. Even if she could cultivate today, she would have improved with Zi Xiecheng's help. How much could she improve? His disciple had been tempered by the spiritual spring water and the mysterious bone-destroying water. Now she was already at the monarch level. Just one more step. She was at the saint level. The Moon Breeze couple also laughed. Feng Yuro said half-jokingly, "Why don't Qianqian and Xiao have a fight too? Whoever wins can become Chu Yang's wife." Yu Lingxue laughed loudly. Wu Qianqian immediately lowered her head, her face red. Mo Qinggu pouted and said, "I can't fight with Sister Wu now. I can't beat her. I'll cultivate properly in a few days and fight when I surpass her." Everyone nearly fainted. "You've already surpassed her. What's there to fight about?" After everyone laughed for a while, Feng Yuro said, "These 2 days have been a little too quiet. Chu Yang, you shouldn't have appeared so forcefully. In this way, I'm afraid the Dharma Supreme and the big clans will target you." Chu Yang smiled lightly. "I was just about to talk about this problem. Because the upper 3 heavens is in a state of panic now. The Tribulation Sword Master is about to finish his apprenticeship. It's going to be another bloodbath soon." Everyone nodded silently. "It's fine if I keep a low profile, but the current situation forces me to do so. Especially after the battle with the big clans. I also remember that I'm at the heart of the struggle," Chu Yang said frankly. Everyone nodded again. "Therefore, once I rise in the future, people will definitely suspect that I'm the Tribulation Sword Master. In that case, the big clans will not rest until I'm dead. And I don't have the ability to go against the big clans now. Now that the Dharma Supreme has confirmed that I'm not the Tribulation Sword Master, I can only take this opportunity to be high profile and let the Dharma Supreme's words be further ingrained in people's hearts. Let everyone think that I rose before the Tribulation Sword Master. Otherwise, I can't afford to be called the Tribulation Sword Master." Chu Yang said jokingly. Moon Breeze couple, Dong Wushang and the others all laughed. "Therefore, the big clans will definitely be wary of me now, but they won't openly go all out against me. Moreover, on the surface, the situation now is that you guys are my backers. Therefore, if they want to deal with someone, they'll deal with you guys first." Buluqing laughed and said, "So you'll have several years of opportunity to develop? And if they want to deal with us?" It's not that I'm boasting, but in this world, there's really no power that can catch all of us in one fell swoop. For people like us, as long as they can't kill all of us in one blow, even if one of us manages to escape, we'll definitely be the nightmare of the big clans and law enforcement officers." Moon Breeze couple also laughed. What Buluqing said was the standard truth. With their abilities, even if they were shamelessly besieged, even if they couldn't defeat them, it would be easy for them to escape. Zi Xiecheng smiled faintly. Her expression was one of extreme restraint. Obviously, she was in full agreement with Buluqing and Moon Breeze couple's words. In this world, there was no one who could hurt her. Absolutely no one. Chu Yang himself also agreed with this argument, but there was a faint worry in his heart. Although this was the truth, excessive self-confidence would definitely lead to a loss. He didn't have time to think about it. The news of the medicine banquet had already arrived. 3 days later, The semifinals would begin. Let's continue to fight. After getting drunk last night, we've also released all the pressure we've been under for the past 10 days. Today we're feeling refreshed. Therefore, we're starting to explode. Chapter 1071. Holding the notice in his hand, Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chu Luer's injuries had already healed, and his main purpose of attending the medicine banquet was to heal Chu Luer's injuries. Now he couldn't use it and couldn't withdraw. He was in a difficult position. The heaven-nourishing jade is a good thing. Bu Luqing saw his hesitation and said, "You must get the heaven-nourishing jade. That thing is equivalent to having an extra life." An extra life? Chu Yang asked doubtfully. Even if the soul disperses, the power of the heaven-nourishing jade can bring the dead back to life. This is the luck of all the pharmacists in the heavenly layer for 1,000 years. Bu Luqing said lightly. Even the heavens can be mended, let alone humans. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. He clenched his fists tightly and said, "There's actually such a miraculous item. Then, this heaven-nourishing jade is really a must. I must have it." Yu Lingshue's eyebrows raised slightly. He wanted to say something, but he forced himself not to. Only the best pharmacist in the world is qualified to get the remnants of the heaven-nourishing jade. You Xiaoman are already 20 years old, and you're actually determined to get it? You're boasting. Then, during the semifinals, who's going to cheer for me? Chu Yang rubbed his fists and asked, "You actually want to cheer for something that you're so confident in?" Zi Xiecheng was dismissive. "Not interested. Qinggu can't go either. There are too many bad people." Bu Luqing shook his head. "No time." Moon Breeze shook their heads together. "Guide the disciple in his cultivation. I want to practice my saber." Dong Wushang admired his dark saber, without even raising his head. "Cough cough, I'm going to sleep." Rui Butong yawned and rubbed his eyes. "I'm so sleepy these few days. I'll accompany Wushang." Mo Layer smiled. "No way." Chu Yang screamed. "Such an important matter, and you want me to handle it alone?" Everyone was silent and busy, pretending not to hear. Mo Qinggu couldn't bear it. She said, "Brother Chu Yang, I want to accompany you, but when Luer comes out of seclusion and fights with me." Chu Yang laughed. On the third day, Chu Yang woke up early and went all the way to Han Shaoran. Along the way, Han Shaoran had a lot on his mind. After Chu Yang asked a few times, Han Shaoran finally let out a long sigh. "Brother, the Dharma Supreme summoned me last night to ask about your situation." Chu Yang's heart shook. He said, "What did you say?" Han Shaoran spread out his hands and said, "What else can I say?" Naturally, he would say whatever he wanted to say. But there's something wrong. Chu Yang smiled and asked, "What's wrong?" Han Shaoran stopped and looked at him deeply. He sighed softly and said, "Brother Chu, I know that you're hiding something. Moreover, the strength behind you is also strong enough. This time, your strong appearance has indeed shocked the heavens. But, let me give you a piece of advice." Chu Yang said seriously, "Brother Han, please speak freely. I'm all ears. After all, a backer is just a backer. If you really want to stand firm in the heavens, you still have to rely on yourself." Han Shaoran said seriously, "Even if you have a backer, what you're doing is too ostentatious. It is not a coincidence that the Dharma Supreme asked about you. I can faintly feel that." He raised his head and looked at Chu Yang, saying, "You have to be careful. There's a murderous intent behind this." Chu Yang's heart moved. He said gratefully, "Thank you, brother. I'll remember it." Han Shaoran said with contradiction, "As a law enforcement officer, it's disgraceful for me to secretly communicate with you. However, you didn't do anything wrong. Moreover, you've been of great help to us law enforcement officers. I can't bear to see people being ungrateful." Sigh. Chu Yang nodded. He could feel the contradiction in Han Shaoran's heart. As the law enforcement master, he was the confidant of the Dharma Supreme. No matter what the reason was, Han Shaoran felt that Han Shaoran was bending the law for favoritism when he said this to Chu Yang. To Han Shaoran, who had always been impartial and upright, this was indeed very precious. It was even unbelievable. However, the Dharma Supreme had murderous intent towards Chu Yang. Chu Yang firmly remembered this matter in his heart. When the two came to the registration area, it was already crowded with people. Most of them were from the big clans. There were thousands of people squeezing at the entrance. The pharmacists entered one by one, but the crowd was not allowed to enter. They could only wait outside. Han Shaoran sent in the identity token that Chu Yang received that day. After a while someone shouted, "The last pharmacist to enter the semifinals, Lin Ri." Everyone was in an uproar. "Lin Ri, there's actually someone with this name?" Chu Yang was also stunned. "What's going on? Why isn't I here? I'm actually the last one." That person shouted at the top of his lungs. "Lin Ri! Lin Ri! Is Lin Ri here?" Chu Yang and Han Shaoran were both stunned. They squeezed in and wanted to ask for clarification. Why was Chu Yang the first to pass? Why was there no place for him now? The next moment, both of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They saw that the pharmacist was holding up Chu Yang's token. He was still shouting at the top of his lungs. "Lin Ri! Lin Ri! Where have you been?" Han Shaoran went over with a black face and scolded in a low voice. "Bastard! Do you know how to read? That's 2 words. Chu Yang. What Lin Ri?" That pharmacist was stunned. He flipped the token over and held it in front of his eyes. With a look of surprise he said, "That's right, it's Lin Ri." "Bastard!" Han Shaoran snatched it over. He was also dumbfounded when he saw it. The handwriting at the back was sloppy. Chu Yang's Chu character was severely separated. Only the Lin character at the top could be seen clearly. As for the lower part, it was just a curve. Chu Yang's Yang character was even divided into 2 characters. And because of the sloppy handwriting, the side of the radical looked like a Yang character. At first glance, it was the 3 words Lin Ri. There was absolutely no mistake. It was the 5th elder who was too excited and casually scratched out Chu Yang's name. The handwriting was too sloppy. It took a long time to explain it clearly. There was a lot of chatter around. What the heck? This person's name is Lin Ri. TSK, what a good name. Someone was amazed. Lin Ri. Ha ha ha. Who's going to name the next one water sex? Another person had a wretched look. Isn't this Chu Yang? When did he change his name to Lin Ri? This was someone who knew young Master Chu. Puffed. Ha ha ha. What a good name. It's too rapey. Another person held his stomach and laughed. Chu Yang entered the venue of the semifinals with a black face. Behind him, there was a lot of whispers and countless weird looks. Minister Chu gritted his teeth. Lin Ri. Motherfucker. When I see that old 5th elder later, I must ask him in detail and clarify everything. This was a huge loss of face. In front of him was a long row of platforms. Within a radius of a few hundred feet, there were no big clans or law enforcement officers except for the platforms, pharmacists, and the judges of the Medicine Valley. Here, the Medicine Valley had the final say. Any other forces, even the number 1 Dharma Supreme in the world, were not qualified to watch the competition here. There were only 13 pharmacists who entered the semifinals. Everyone was facing a platform. On the platform, there was a lonely medicine furnace. Every medicine furnace was exactly the same. However, Chu Yang vaguely felt that there was something strange about the aura of a few of the pharmacists. This was clearly a kind of oppressive feeling of death that came from the suppression of one's divine spirit. Moreover, it was these few people who were paying attention to him, whether intentionally or not. Their eyes were filled with hatred, and there was a bone-chilling murderous aura. It was as if they could not live under the same sky with him. However, when Chu Yang wanted to observe them quietly, he realized that these people had all turned their heads around without leaving a trace. They faced the medicinal cauldron directly, and did not even look at Chu Yang from the corner of their eyes. Chu Yang only saw a few expressionless faces. These faces reminded Chu Yang of the young valley master of the Medicine Valley, who hosted the auction. Chu Yang was stunned. These people's faces were very familiar. He remembered seeing them a few days ago, and they were all very lively. Why then, in the direction of the entrance, the people of the Medicine Valley began to disperse. They actually chased all the people who were cheering for them a few hundred feet away. At such a distance, there was no need to talk about cheering for them. Those who were weak in cultivation could not see anything at all. let alone recognize the pharmacists on their side. Then, many experts of the Medicine Valley surrounded the place from all directions. The Medicine Valley's defense of this medicine banquet was so tight. Then, a white shadow flashed in front of Chu Yang, and the others and 3 people in white appeared. One of them was holding a stack of cards. It was the zombie-faced young Valley Master. He said rigidly, "Fellow pharmacists, I am the owner of the prescriptions of the Medicine Valley. These 2 beside me, one is the High Priest of the Medicine Valley, and the other is the second High Priest. The 3 of us will be the judges of your semifinals." There was a commotion among the pharmacists. The High Priest and the second High Priest. These 2 people were once people who had won the honor of being the #1 pharmacist in the world back in the day. Everyone was really flattered that these 2 people would be the judges in person. Chu Yang's eyes also lit up a little. But then he realized that the zombie-faced person next to him was expressionless. There was no change in his eyes either, as if he was already prepared. "Now let's start the roll call." The zombie-faced young Valley Master looked at the cards in front of him and picked up the topmost card. He read Lin Ri. Chu Yang's card was the last to be handed up, so it was naturally at the topmost. So the young Valley Master called his name first. Chu Yang's face was full of black lines. He said, "It's not Lin Ri. Young Valley Master, this is my card. The 5th Elder's handwriting is messy. He wrote my name wrong." The zombie-faced young Valley Master couldn't help but be surprised. He lowered his head and looked carefully for a while before he recognized that it was indeed a very abstract word, Chu Yang. The corners of his mouth twitched. He said, "Chu Yang." Chu Yang answered loudly, "Here." The young Valley Master grunted and raised the card in front of his eyes again. He muttered to himself, "It really looks like Lin Ri." Chapter 1072. Everyone roared with laughter. Although the young Valley Master had a straight face, he was still a little embarrassed. He was much more careful when he called out the names again. He looked at the names, and then at the faces of the people before announcing that they had passed. He called out the names one by one. When he reached the Ling clan, it was Ling Hanwu's name. Chu Yang looked over and saw that Ling Hanwu's expression was stiff. He was even more rigid than those from the Yi and Xiao clans. Chu Yang was startled again. He said tentatively, "Uncle Ling, you're here too." Ling Hanwu grunted and said, "Yes." Chu Yang was stunned. What was going on? Moreover, the way Ling Hanwu was looking at him was also very strange. Looking at him from the side, he saw that his face seemed to be completely pale. Chu Yang's words attracted the attention of the young Valley Master of the Medicine Valley. He was also startled and suddenly asked, "You know each other?" Chu Yang coughed twice and said, "Something's not right." The young Valley Master was stunned again. Then he pondered and moved closer. Ling Hanwu couldn't help but want to avoid him. The young Valley Master shouted, "Don't move." He circled around Ling Hanwu and muttered curses. There's indeed something fishy going on. Returning to his original position, he shouted, "Ling Hanwu of the Ling clan, come out." Ling Hanwu answered and stepped out. The young Valley Master stepped forward with a solemn face and tore off Ling Hanwu's face. What appeared behind the mask was actually the image of another person. The High Priest and Second Priest's faces darkened. What the hell was the Ling clan doing? How could they impersonate someone else in such a once-in-a-thousand-year ceremony? "Why is it you? Where's Ling Hanwu?" The High Priest suppressed the anger in his heart. He asked in a low voice. This person was the candidate from the Ling clan to participate in the medicine banquet previously. He actually appeared again this time. That person stammered, "Second Master." "Second Master, he was drunk yesterday and couldn't get out of bed." Chu Yang was speechless. There was actually such a thing. Was he drunk? This Second Master Ling was indeed his teacher's rival in love. He actually got dead drunk at such a crucial moment. The High Priest snorted heavily and shouted, "Ling Hanwu of the Ling clan is not here. Time is up, we can't wait any longer. Expel this person from the competition. The Ling family will be disqualified." Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the pharmacist from the Ling family was sent flying by a flurry of punches and kicks. The 3 from the Medicine Valley continued to curse in dissatisfaction. This was the first time something like this had happened in the past 10,000 years. He was drunk. Thinking of these 4 words, the 2 consecrators felt as if they had eaten a fly. Of course, that wasn't the case for the Ling family. Ling Hanwu of the Ling clan was indeed drunk, but the reason why he didn't come was not because he was drunk. Ling Hanwu had come to participate this time. It was just that he had snatched the spot. Their true motive wasn't the medicine banquet, but Yi Chuchen. If Ling Hanwu went on stage, he would definitely lose. However, the Dharma Supreme's request was to exclude Chu Yang. Ling Fengyun naturally couldn't bear to peel off the skin of his great-grandson's face and perform another soul transfer. So he randomly grabbed a pharmacist and performed the soul transfer technique to transfer the pharmacist's luck. He then used a human skin mask to create Ling Hanwu's face and let the previous top pharmacist take his place in the competition. But things were after all too rushed. After all, this human skin mask wasn't as useful as directly using the soul transfer magic art as a living person. Although the Ling clan had put in a lot of effort, the medicine banquet only recognized the token and not the person. Once one entered, the roll call would be over. Who would have thought that Chu Yang would actually start talking to Ling Hanwu at this moment? Wasn't this purely being insensible? All the pharmacists of the medicine banquets, who would chat with each other. Were they asking you to compete? Or were they asking you to chat? But it was Minister Chu's first time participating, and no one had reminded him about the things to take note of. Greeting and acquaintance was a natural etiquette. Who would have thought that this call actually eliminated the Ling clan? Such a lucky hit really made one not know whether to laugh or cry. When the pharmacist from the Ling clan left, his gaze was as if he wanted to swallow Chu Yang alive. Outside, the people from the big clans gathered in a group. A few of them were watching, and when they saw that the Ling clan was actually chased out, everyone's expression was very interesting. The supreme martial artist from the Ling clan, who was in charge here, was even more gloomy. Yi Shiyu from the Yi clan twisted his butt and said sarcastically, "This is really strange. The Ling clan, hee. How are we going to explain this matter?" The supreme martial artist from the Ling clan was ashen. The Dharma Supreme had personally arranged it, but the Ling clan had sent an imposter. How were they going to explain this matter to the Dharma Supreme? When that person came out and asked, he found out that this matter was actually ruined by Chu Yang again. For a moment, he couldn't help but grit his teeth so hard that they almost shattered. This jinx. Ever since the Ling clan met him on the road, nothing good had happened to them. Inside, the names were called. The high priest gave a few instructions, and then the people from the Medicine Valley walked in with trays one by one. A tray was placed in front of everyone. Then an unlit incense stick was placed in front of everyone. When Chu Yang saw this, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Although the amount of medicine on this tray wasn't large, there were many types. In addition, there were extremely cold items, extremely in items, extremely hot items, extremely poisonous items, extremely nourishing items. There were a total of 30 types of medicine, but basically all of them had conflicting medicinal properties. Using such things to refine medicine, perhaps just mixing 2 of them together would be enough to poison a person to death. Next, I will announce the rules of the competition. The high priest looked at the people in front of him and said, "As you can see, there are 30 types of medicine, taken from various extremes in the world. Each type is only enough to refine 1 pill. Your task is to refine all of these medicines within the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn out. The requirement is to use 2 conflicting types of medicine to refine medicine. The minimum required is 5 great nourishing pills and 5 extremely poisonous pills. This is the minimum requirement. Whoever can refine the most will have the purer medicinal properties. Whoever can refine the most will win. This competition will be ranked from the top to the bottom. Only the top 10 will be chosen. Those who use the wrong medicine will be automatically eliminated. Before the incense stick burns out, those who don't complete the task will be automatically eliminated. 5 great nourishing pills and 5 extremely poisonous pills. Those who don't complete the task will be automatically eliminated. Destroy any of the materials. Automatically eliminated. Those who use any means to disturb others in refining medicine will be automatically eliminated. Those who use any external help will be automatically eliminated. A series of automatic eliminations was announced. Even Chu Yang was a little scared. These requirements were really too harsh. They had to use medicine with completely conflicting medicinal properties within the stipulated time. To complete all of this conflicting medicinal properties. How to adjust? Once the adjustment was not done properly, the furnace would explode, and the body would be injured. The medicine would be completely destroyed. The degree of refinement was equivalent to walking on a tightrope on a high cliff. Furthermore, it had to be done at least 15 times. For a moment, all the pharmacists looked at each other. Chu Yang suddenly felt that the pharmacists from the big clans. It seemed that there was no accident. Furthermore, their eyes didn't even move. Could it be that they cheated? Chu Yang's thoughts flashed. Could it be that they knew the competition's topic in advance? That they were prepared? Looking at the calm expressions of the 7 or 8 people, the more Chu Yang thought about it, the more he felt that his conjecture was really too reasonable. He couldn't help but grit his teeth. Damn it, do you think I can't cheat? At this moment, the high priest shouted, "Now light the incense stick. Begin immediately." The pharmacists who had brought the tray over had been standing in front of everyone all along. Now that they heard the order, they immediately went forward. After lighting the incense stick, they immediately retreated silently and left the competition grounds. The high priest and the other 2 also retreated as light as feathers. They retreated until they were 300 feet away and looked over. All the pharmacists immediately got busy, picking the herbs, extracting their essences, mixing them immediately, adjusting the furnace, observing the temperature. Only young Master Chu stood there like a wooden chicken, not moving at all. The pharmacists from the big clans looked at this dazed fellow, who was obviously at a loss because of these rules. They couldn't help but gloat. Damn it, he had never experienced such a situation before. For a rookie who had just participated in the medicine banquet for the first time, he actually had to give up his life. What an injustice! Although the clans had promised that their descendants and relatives would be taken care of tenfold in the future, and be the first to enter the Hall of Elites. But, to die just like that, everyone still felt uncomfortable in their hearts. Who wanted to die? Even if it was someone whose wife was stolen, or he was castrated. The thought of dying would only appear in the first few days or months. Once this period of time passed, they would get used to living on. No one wanted to die in this world. Especially to die for such a dazed fool. They were even more unwilling. As they cursed in their hearts, their hands kept moving. At this moment, no one dared to fall behind. Because if they couldn't complete the mission, not only would they die, their clan's preferential treatment would also be revoked. On the other side, young Master Chu was still as dazed as a wooden chicken, not moving at all. No one knew that this Sword Master Chu's divine senses had already sunk into his consciousness space at this moment. He called out, "Sword Spirit, it's your turn. They are all cheating, let's cheat too." The Sword Spirit rolled his eyes and said, "It's obvious that you can't do this at all. Even if they don't cheat, you still have to cheat. Why are you acting so righteous now?" Chu Yang said calmly, "Of course, cheating is something that must be done no matter what. But since they are also cheating, then it's even more reasonable for us to be righteous." The Sword Spirit let out a long sigh. Cheating? He can even do it so righteously. This Sword Master is really different from the rest. Left with no choice, the Sword Spirit could only step forward. Chu Yang's body trembled slightly. This degree was just a very normal slight tremble. But no one knew that this body was no longer under the control of young Master Chu himself. Instead, it had been replaced by a 100,000-year-old monster. As for young Master Chu himself, of course, he comfortably soaked in the soul-tempering pool and took a bath. He muttered to himself, "Isn't it just cheating? What's the big deal? This Sword Master is just about to take a rest. What I want is the heaven-nourishing jade, not the competition." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.